Hey, what's going on everybody? It's Mr. Buddy here, and today we're going to be taking a look at another What If Pokemon region. In case you're out of the know, in this video series, I like to take a look at what certain countries around the world could be like as Pokemon regions, and speculate on possible aspects about them. I've done many videos in this series ranging from Greece to Australia to Scandinavia, and in them I like to talk about possible locations that could be included in these what-if regions, potential new Pokemon that could be made for them, and of course what stories these hypothetical regions could tell. For today's regional video, we'll be traveling to the Mediterranean Sea, and we'll be taking a look at what Italy could be like as a Pokemon region. Italy is a country that has so much culture and history to it, and whether we're talking about how the art renaissance started there, or how Italy is where the Roman civilization came to be, nobody can deny that there's quite a lot to this country, making it a prime location to talk about what it could be like as a Pokemon region. Now before I jump into this region fully and share all my thoughts and ideas, just a couple of quick notes. Number 1, this video is not meant to be speculation on an upcoming Pokemon games region. Most people will probably see this video at different times, and if you're watching this when a new Pokemon game is coming out, and the region I'll be talking about today has similarities to an official Game Freak made one, just know that it's all a coincidence, and this video was always meant to be just a fun, idea-filled video, rather than serious speculation. The second thing is please go to the description and check out all the fantastic artists who helped make this video. I say this every time, but they're a huge part of my regional videos, and without their help these regions wouldn't be anywhere near as awesome as they are. I commissioned a ton of artwork ranging from characters to environments to Pokemon from very talented people, so please go to the description, check them out, and give them the credit they deserve. The next thing I want to mention is please feel free to leave your own ideas and suggestions in the comments section below. Whether you thought of a cool place or Pokemon idea that could be in this Italy region, or there's a certain country or area you want to see me do a video on, I love reading your guys' comments, so please don't hesitate to share your own thoughts and ideas below. Number 4, all you longtime subscribers don't need me to mention this, but in case someone new is watching this series, I am terrible with pronunciation. I try as hard as I can to pronounce things right in every regional video, but there's always a lot of words I mispronounce. So please forgive me for how a lot of the things are going to be pronounced, and just try to laugh at how bad most of everything is going to sound, because believe me, it's gonna get pretty bad. Alright, the final thing worth bringing up is that these regional videos are very long, and if you want to jump around between sections, here's some timestamps you can use to do so. I joke all the time about my regional videos being like movies, and maybe one day I'll make a full breakdown of the Buddyverse or MBCU, but with these videos being so long and cinematic, if you only want to see what new Pokemon I thought of for an Italian region, or some of the cool places that could be in it, these timestamps will help you jump around quickly. Alright, I think that about covers it for the intro. We've got so much to talk about in this video, including ancient Roman ruins, an evil team born from the Renaissance, and even some Pokemon based on Italian mythology, so I think it's time we officially kick this video off and take a look at what Italy could be like as a Pokemon region. Let's begin by taking a look at real-life Italy's geography and wildlife, and how that could translate into the Pokemon world in terms of this region's environments, climate, and what old Pokemon could be found throughout the region. So Italy is located in southern Europe and is right on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It's surrounded by many countries such as France to the west, Germany and Austria to the north, and Greece to the east, and in terms of its size, Italy is somewhat large, being ranked as the 10th largest European country according to its total area. Now, as far as what Italy's geography and environments are like, there's a lot to talk about here because the country has a wealth of different locales. The far northern part of Italy has the snowy and towering Alps mountain range, which spreads all throughout Europe. There's the Tuscan countryside found roughly in the middle of Italy, which has many rolling hills and vineyards. There are forests and grasslands scattered all throughout the mainland. There's more rugged mountains in the form of the Apennine mountain range, which runs right down the boot of Italy, so to speak. The country has an arid desert called the Ancona Desert, and let's not forget about all the islands and somewhat tropical areas that are considered part of Italy too, including the two very large islands of Sardinia, which is right here, and Sicily, which is right at the tip of Italy's boot. Alongside all these various environments, there's also a ton of ruins scattered throughout Italy as well. We'll be going over this a lot in the other sections, but the general area of Italy has been inhabited by humans for thousands of years. And because of that, there's a lot of ruins and ancient areas in the country that I think could be included in an Italian Pokemon region as well. Between these many different landscapes, I think Italy practically covers all the bases it needs to be a great and diverse Pokemon region. And I see this Italian region having areas and routes inspired by all these different terrains. As far as what official Pokemon could inhabit these environments in region, I did think of a list here, but it's worth noting that while most of the Pokemon I put in are based on real-life animals found in Italy and their Pokemon counterparts, there are some Pokemon I put in the region just because I think they'd fit in well and aren't necessarily tied to real-life Italy's wildlife in any way. Okay, so first up, I think the somewhat tropical and island areas would have Pokemon like the Tailo line, the Fomantis line, Heracross, Pinsir, Yanma, Aipom, the Spinarak line, and Gumi. The mountainous areas, which would be split up into 3 sections, an ice-type area inspired by the Alps, a fire-type area inspired by Mount Vesuvius, which we'll talk about later, and a general mountainous area, would have Pokemon such as the Teddiursa line, the Rockruff line, Stantler, the Shinx line, the Volibee line, Onix, the Rhyhorn line, Torkoal, Larvesta, the Bergmite line, Sneasel, and Snover. The desert areas would have Solrock, Lunatone, Sandshrew, Sandslash, the Bunnelby line, and the Zorua line. The grasslands and forested areas might see things like Togedemaru, the Weedle line, Vulpix, the Pidgey line, Petalil and Lilligant, the Oddish line, the Budew line, Bidoof, Woobat, and Smeargle. Seaside and coastal areas could have Pokemon such as Seal, Dugong, the Psyduck line, the Tympole line, Inkay and Malamar, Basculin, Lovedisk, the Barbarical line, and Dewpider. And the ruins/abandoned areas of the region might see things like the Rattata line, Purloin, Hoot Hoot, Golett and Golurk, the Spritzy line, Yamask and Cofagrigus, Murkrow, and the Dino line. Obviously, there's no way I could name every single old Pokemon that could fit into this region, but this is a small glimpse at what monsters I think could inhabit the many areas throughout the land. There's also a lot of brand new Pokemon ideas I thought of for this region as well, but we'll go over those a little later on in their own section. When it comes to the towns and locations that could be in this region, Italy has quite a lot of places to look at for inspiration. I mentioned it in the previous section, but the general Italian area has been inhabited for a long time, over 4,000 years to be precise. And because of that, there's a lot of unique locations around the country that tie into its historic legacy. There's many villages that are made out of stone or carved into mountains and cliffsides. There's a plethora of ruins scattered throughout Italy, including those dating back to the Roman Empire, as well as ruins from other civilizations that have inhabited the area throughout the past. Many unique modern cities such as Venice and Milan, small rustic towns in the countryside, and you guys get the idea. The bottom line I'm trying to get across is that Italy has such a sense of culture to everything that stems from its history, and there was a ton to work with when it came to thinking of towns and side locations for this Italian Pokemon region. I should note, however, that Italy having so many awesome locations is kind of a double-edged sword, because there's so much to this country that there was no way I could put everything cool and unique it has to offer into a Pokemon region. I tried my best to capture the general spirit of many of Italy's important and significant landmarks, but unfortunately there was just no way I could put all the awesome stuff I found in Italy into this region. Adding on to that, there's also a couple towns and locations I ended up taking a few creative liberties with. Nothing too drastic, but some of the towns I ended up moving to different spots compared to where they are in real life. A few locations I had to boil down to just their most crucial elements so I could squeeze them into the region, and a few of the places I made a little more fantastical to blend into the Pokemon world's vibe. Even though there are a few differences in this region compared to real-life Italy, as well as a couple popular places I had to leave out, I still feel like I was able to capture the general essence of Italy pretty well, and create a region that not only shows off the country's wealth of culture and history, but also shows off an idea of just what Italy could be like within the Pokemon world. Alright, let's kick our tour through this region off with the starting town, which is based on the city of Cagliari on the island of Sardinia. In real life, this is a very populated city right on the coast, and while it is a popular tourist destination where many cruise ships come, there's a wealth of culture to be found here. Many ruins and museums with artifacts relating to the ancient city of Carolus are in the town, including the Tuvigzedu Necropolis, a Roman amphitheater and an aqueduct, and there's also things relating to more modern times in comparison, like numerous cathedrals, churches, and beachside areas. There's really a lot of legacy to this town that dates back decades, and I think it can make for a cool starting Pokemon city. It wouldn't be huge, but at the same time it wouldn't be anywhere near as small as past starting towns have been. This would be a starting town that has a few houses, including the players, a Pokemon Center, one of the professor's labs, and numerous ruins like a Roman amphitheater-inspired area for the many tourists, including the player, to visit. Moving on from the starting town would take you along a route that leads you through a small area in the middle of the island that has ruins based on real-life Sardinia's Sunuroxi archaeological site. This area would be an old stone tower, much like the real-life ruins are, and within the Pokemon world, many tourists and artists travel to the Sardinia-based island just to see these ruins in person. Also, because you're a trainer, you can go inside and explore the tower, finding all sorts of Pokemon and old items in the process. When you decide to leave the Sunuroxi-based area, you have a branching path of where to go next, and if you go right, this will take you to a coastal town based on Olbia. Olbia, much like many other places on Sardinia, has quite a legacy with ruins in the past. I think a few of the ruins found in Olbia could be in this Pokemon town, such as the remains of a Roman forum and the broken down Carthaginian walls, but I also think this Pokemon town would have a relatively modern side to it as well, with areas based on the medieval church of St. Paul, a small area in the center of town based on the Fausto Noce Park, and a Pokemon gym you can challenge. The final area on the island you can go to is all the way on the western coast and is a seaside cave based on a place known as Neptune's Grotto. This is a cave system that's very close to the sea, and it really struck me as an awesome place to put into this region. I can just picture a trainer traveling along the outside of the grotto, traversing its ancient steps, before getting inside of it and finding a tranquil cave full of all sorts of rare Pokemon. There's also a network of underwater caverns that connect to this grotto, and I think it would be neat to return to this cave later in the game and explore them with your Pokemon. So these four places, the Cagliari starting town, the Sunuroxi ruin area, the Olbia-based town, and the cave based on Neptune's Grotto, are the areas I envision making up this Sardinia-based island, and if I may take the idea a step further, I also think this island would act as the intro area for the game. You would be introduced to your rival and the region's professor here, you'd have your first gym battle and capture your first Pokemon, and this entire island is meant to teach you the basics of Pokemon before you head to the mainland and get into the main part of your journey. Speaking of the mainland, let's follow the path the player would when traversing this hypothetical game and jump over to the bulk of this Italy-inspired region. When you finally get to depart from the starting island, you'll hop aboard a boat at the Cagliari town, which takes you to a small dock in the southern part of the region's mainland. From this dock, you travel northward through a short route that ends up taking you to a town inspired by the Italian city Matera. Matera is one of the coolest places in Italy because not only has the city and its general area been inhabited in some form for over 9,000 years, but the city itself lies in a canyon sculpted out by the river Gravina, and many of the buildings, especially those in the town's old district of Sassi, were carved out of stone within the canyon. This gives a lot of the town a very unique stone-based aesthetic, which personally, I really like that kind of earthy Italian architectural style, and I think this Pokemon town could have that same kind of visual theme to it. Now, aside from the awesome visual style and historic legacy this town would bring to the Pokemon world, I also think the Pokemon version of Matera would be very vertical in a way. Because real-life Matera is built into a canyon essentially, there's a ton of stairways and layers to the city, and I think this Pokemon town could incorporate that general feeling into it and have almost a slight maze-like quality, where you constantly have to go up and down different stairways and walkways to traverse the town's various buildings. When you leave the Matera-based location and travel east, this will take you to a small village based on Ostuni. Ostuni has many notable things within it, like the Ostuni Cathedral, an arch within the city called the Arco Scopa, or Scopa Arch, and multiple museums and art galleries that I think would be great things to put into this Pokemon town. Adding on to that, one of the most notable things about Ostuni is that in real life, a lot of the buildings have a white paint aesthetic to them, and Ostuni is often called the White City because of this. I think this Pokemon town based on it could have a similar visual style, where most, if not all of the buildings could be painted white, and it could serve as a neat way to pay homage to the real-life city and give the town a distinct look to help it stand out. When departing the town, if you go back to the Matera location and head south, this will take you to a medium-sized town based on Cosenza. This is an Italian city that is often seen as a cultural hub for southern Italy, and has numerous libraries within it, such as the District Library, State Archive Library, and National Library, a few museums including the Bilotti Open Air Museum, a couple historic cathedrals and churches like the Church of San Domenico and the Cathedral of Cosenza, and there's also many festivals held here too. Now, even though I think a Pokemon town based on Cosenza would have its own versions of these places and events, like having a large library dedicated to documenting Pokemon that appear in the region, a museum full of old relics that trainers used in the ancient past, and maybe even a small festival is happening in the town's plaza when you wander through there, I still felt like the town as a whole was missing something. Not anything huge, but just another point of interest to spice the area up a little bit and give the player another reason to visit the town. After I researched more of Italy, I did end up coming up with an idea for an additional area in this town, but I do have to warn you guys that I took a pretty big creative liberty with what I decided to add. So just keep that in mind as I go through and detail it. So the final area I think could be in this Cosenza-inspired town is a large gated estate within the city's boundaries. There would be a stately manor inside meant to resemble some of the palace-like buildings in Cosenza like Palazzo Cersale and Palazzo Arnone, and there would be a massive garden in the perimeter too, that's based on the Villa Vecchia public garden. Within this garden, there would be an array of special Pokemon not native to this Italy region you can capture, and for those that are good at finding things, there would also be a hidden cave you can explore that's based on Ularic's legendary tomb, which is a famous landmark in Cosenza that's where the legendary warrior Ularic and all his treasure were said to be buried. Now, this location is an amalgam of many different things within Cosenza, but the actual idea of a large gated estate like this is something that I made up purely for this region. You wouldn't be able to find something like this in real-life Cosenza, and the reason I added a location like this to the town is mainly for the story I thought of for the region. We'll be going over this a lot more when we get to the actual story section, but to give you guys a small hint at how this area ties into everything, let's just say that this is the personal house for a powerful mob boss working in the region. Who is he exactly? How is he connected to everything? Well, you'll just have to wait until I go over the narrative section to find out. Alright, since this Cosenza-based town is a dead end, let's go back to the Matera location and travel west. This will start to take you up the boot of the region, and you'll travel through a very volcanic route, which is inspired by Mount Vesuvius. In real life, Mount Vesuvius is located right next to the city of Naples, which is roughly here, and is a large volcano that has erupted many times throughout the course of history. I felt like Vesuvius was such a big and recognizable part of Italy that I wanted it to have more of a focus in the region than just a side area attached to a town. So I decided to move it slightly from where it's located in real life and turn it into a large route the player has to traverse in this region. An active volcano like Vesuvius is perfect inspiration for a fire-type route in Pokémon, and I think the route leading to a potential Naples city would take you along a winding road that goes inside and on the exterior of a fiery Vesuvius-like volcano. If you want a point of comparison, I picture this area being similar to Reversal Mountain in Pokémon White 2, where there's not only a lot of fire-type Pokémon to catch, but also a lot of magma and fire you have to try and maneuver around without getting burned. Now, within this region's mountain area, there would be a very well-hidden passageway you could find that would take you to the region's ghost-type area, which is based on Pompeii. In Italy's history, Pompeii was a Roman settlement right at the base of Mount Vesuvius, and when the volcano suddenly erupted in 79 AD, the people living in the city didn't have enough time to evacuate, and the town was buried under the ash, mud, and rocks that came from the exploding Vesuvius. It wasn't until 1748 when this ancient Roman town was rediscovered in the modern era, and what more, the rock and soot it was buried by actually helped preserve the city in an almost identical state to how it was back in 79 AD. If you go to the ruins of Pompeii today, you can actually walk through them and get a pretty good picture of what it was like for ancient Romans to live in the ancient past. Now, how I see this region's Pompeii-based location being handled is that I think you could explore the partially unearthed ruins of a Pompeii-like town, finding all sorts of old items and possibly even the petrified remains of humans and Pokémon that weren't able to escape the nearby volcano's eruption long ago, and the whole area would give off a very somber and creepy feeling that's further accentuated by all the ghost types that would live in the area. Once you've had enough of exploring this eerie side location, perhaps even finding a fossil that you can take with you and revive later in the region, you press onwards through the rest of the Mount Vesuvius route until you arrive at a medium-sized city based on Naples. In real life, Naples, known in Italian as Napoli, is a city that, as I mentioned earlier, is literally right next to Mount Vesuvius. The town itself rests on the coast, but looming right behind it, ever present, is the volcanic mountain. What I decided to do with this Pokemon town was give it a somewhat hot and volcanic theme to reference Naples and Vesuvius's connection to each other in real life. Kind of like how Loveridge Town in Hoenn is influenced by being close to Mount Chimney and has things like a hot spring and lava cookies, this Naples-based Pokemon town would also have many aspects about it affected due to its close proximity to the Vesuvius-inspired volcano. In terms of specifics, I think this town would be built in a large field area that's very hot and has steam constantly being emitted from it, in reference to the Phlegraean Fields, which is an area in Naples that's well known for its volcanic activity. There would be a large warm lake in the middle of town, which is inspired by an old volcanic crater lake called Lake Avernus, and numerous buildings would be built around the lake to form the majority of the town, such as places based on the multiple castles Naples has, like Castel dell'Ovo, Castel Nuovo, and Castel Sant'Elmo, a shopping area based on Galleria Umberto, an old building based on the Royal Palace of Naples, and the town's gym, which would be a large opera house based on Teatro di San Carlo, or the Theater of St. Charles. Alright, moving on from the Naples location, you have a split path of where you go next, and if you travel on the more northern leading route, you'll wind up in a small coastal village based on the Italian town of Pescara. This is a town made famous for its beaches, and while not 100% accurate to the real-life city, I think that's what would be the most prominent thing about this settlement. You'd go over a bridge based on Ponte del Mar, and once in this city, you'd be met with a relaxing seaside town that's overall visual style would look close to the La Prora Beach Village Resort. The actual content of the town would offer things ranging from a museum dedicated to modern art, which is based on the Vittoria Colonna Museum of Modern Art, a cathedral-like building based on the Pescara Cathedral, and a small Ferris wheel by the town's large beach. Now, before we keep traveling onward and upward through the region, we should probably go back and take a look at the town on the other route we didn't go through, because it's kind of a big deal. If you return to the split path at Naples and journey on the westward bound road, this will lead you to the biggest and most important city in this Italian region, which is based on Rome. This massive city was originally built by the ancient Romans, and over the course of thousands of years has evolved and flourished into the metropolis of culture it is today. There's almost 3 million people living in what is considered to be modern-day Rome, and on top of that, the city contains practically a millennia of art and history on display, ranging from art galleries, sculptures, paintings, fountains, monuments from Roman times, old Roman temples, the Vatican, the Colosseum where gladiators would fight, ancient Egyptian obelisks, aqueducts, parks, modern buildings, numerous churches and basilicas, and I could go on forever listing cool and interesting things within the area. Rome truly does live up to its nickname of the Eternal City. Now, because there is so much to Rome, how I decided to parse this real-life megalopolis and translate it into a Pokemon region was to split it up into 3 different sections. I know this isn't the most elegant way to go about putting a huge city like Rome into the Pokemon world, but it was the best idea I came up with. So the first section of this city is basically the main area you get to explore. Rome has such a unique feeling to it where it's a blend of ancient Roman architecture and modern day aesthetics, and that's the overall feeling I think the majority of this large town would have. You'd walk down cobblestone streets, which is a remnant from Roman times, and all around you you'd find a treasure trove of galleries, museums, and innovations everywhere. Some of the big points of interest in this town would be a large plaza in the city inspired by Piazza Navona, which is a central square in Rome that was built over an ancient stadium and would include a large fountain based on Fontana dei Quattro Fiumi, or the Fountain of the Four Rivers. There would be a giant building nearby that resembles the Roman Pantheon, an ancient Roman temple that I think would be tied into this region's Elite Four in a way, which I should clarify right now, it wouldn't be the actual Pokemon League, but somewhere that the Elite Four hangs out at. There would be another large fountain in the town that's based on the Trevi Fountain, a popular fountain in Rome devoted to the Titan god Oceanus, and there would also be a lot of normal houses and buildings you can explore as well, including a building based on Torre Euroschi, which is the tallest building in Rome. Alright, so that's a look at what I think the main section of this town could be like, and moving on to the next important area within PokeRome now, we find ourselves at a massive building surrounded by walls which is based on the Vatican. Now the Vatican, officially known as Vatican City, is the worldwide headquarters for the Catholic Church, and is technically a separate city that's embedded right in the middle of Rome. Not only that, but it's also technically its own country, and is encircled by a 2-mile border that separates everything inside from the rest of Rome and Italy. The Vatican is such an integral part of Italy and Rome's legacy that I always knew I'd put it into this Pokemon region, but I just never knew how exactly I wanted to fit it in. I had a lot of early ideas for things to do with it, like having the Pokemon League potentially be located here, or possibly having a legendary Pokemon residing in the area, but in the end I decided to go in a slightly different direction with it. While this might not be the most exciting thing ever, I feel like the Vatican is well known for housing a lot of Italy's famous art and historic relics, and I picture this building based on it being a very big cultural center for the region. When you enter this building, you'll be met with the sight of a massive multi-room museum that houses a lot of famous paintings, art, and history from around the region, many of which are influenced by works of art from real life, and this gallery also draws a lot of inspiration from the Vatican Museums and Sistine Chapel. Now, to give this building within the Pokemon world a little bit more context on how it ties into everything, I mentioned earlier that it's supposed to be something of a cultural center, where the region's most famous pieces of art and history are stored. And in addition to that, this museum-type area is also being run by an organization that has strong ties to the region's ancient past. We haven't really talked about it yet, but I imagine this Italian Pokemon region having a history that parallels real-life Italy, in the sense that I think thousands of years ago there was an ancient civilization that had a huge empire before it fell from grace, much like the real-life Roman Empire of Italy. I named this early society and its people the Poke-Romans, which is a pretty obvious reference to the real-life Romans, and the group that runs the modern-day region's Vatican-based area is made up entirely of descendants from this once great civilization. Their group is named Team Imperium, and yes, these are the same Team Imperium found in my England video. And they started running this region's Vatican-inspired cultural center because of their strong ties to the Poke-Romans' legacy. They wanted to preserve the art and history of the region that has been left behind throughout the ages so it can be remembered and celebrated for centuries, which is why they run such a historic museum-like building. There's definitely a lot more to say about Team Imperium's involvement with the region and its story, but I think that stuff is better suited for when we get to the story section. Okay, so we've gone over the main section of the city, as well as the Team Imperium-run Vatican-inspired area, so let's look at one final important place I think could be in this Rome Pokemon City, which is heavily influenced by the old Roman Colosseum. This is one of the most famous landmarks in Rome, and while in the present it's a partially decaying amphitheater built around a large arena, in the ancient past this is where the Romans would have brutal gladiator fights, where battle-hardened warriors would square off against criminals and sometimes even ferocious animals. What I decided to do with this area in region is that when you reach a certain point in the story, you'll be invited by Team Imperium, the same group that runs the large Vatican-inspired area we just talked about, to go and see the Rome-based town's Colosseum. Rather than a dusty set of ruins, you'll find that Team Imperium has taken it upon themselves to honor the ancient Poke-Roman tradition of having gladiator-style battles in the Colosseum. And you can actually join in on the Pokemon battles and have intense showdowns within the ancient stadium. This side activity plays out somewhat like the Battle Tower, in the sense that you can sign up to join in on the gladiator-style Pokemon battles that are happening in the Colosseum's arena, but there's a little bit of a twist with how it all works. For the most part, you end up battling many different trainers, ranging from members of Team Imperium, to common trainers, to even some special boss trainers who provide quite a challenge to fight. But in addition to the presence of trainers, there will also be some rounds where you have to battle hordes of Pokemon, or even totem Pokemon. Seeing as how real-life gladiators often fought formidable animals, I wanted this Colosseum area to reference that. And so sometimes, instead of facing off against a trainer, you'll find yourself battling a horde of strong Pokemon, or even going toe-to-toe with a totem Pokemon that was imported from the faraway Alola region. Alright, if you can pry yourself away from the mass amount of things to do in the Rome-based city and decide to continue on your journey, you'll travel along a very swamp-like and forested route, which is a reference to central Italy's Pontine marshes. Within the marshes, you would see many statues and sculptures dedicated to Pokemon and trainers from across the region's history, which is meant to be a reference to Parco dei Mostri, or the Park of Monsters, which is a place in Italy that has many sculptures and buildings embedded in a natural forest. Once you've waded through the waters of this route, you'll then arrive in a small farm town that's meant to be a general embodiment of Italy's Tuscan countryside. Now, Tuscany is a very broad area in Italy that covers a significant portion of the central section of the country, and is highly regarded for its artistic legacy, traditions, and landscapes. We'll talk about a couple places in just a second that embody those first two aspects and have very heavy Renaissance and legacy vibes to them, but for this town, I wanted to capture the essence of the Tuscan countryside. Many of the rural areas in real-life Tuscany are well known for farming and agriculture, and this Pokemon town would be a general representation of these types of villages. This would be a small town in the region that's renowned for its farming and huge vineyard, and while it might not have the ruins or art museums that other towns have, it would still give you a unique feeling that you wouldn't get anywhere else in the region. Speaking of unique areas, from this small countryside town you can access a side area inspired by a historic town known as Urbino. Now, I'm gonna try not to get into a huge history lesson here, but Urbino is a walled castle town that in Italy's past was one of the few places to keep the spirit of the Renaissance alive when most of the country was at war. Urbino was a place that fostered the arts, creativity, and peace, and many credit it and its ruler, Federico da Montefeltro, aka the Light of Italy, as protectors of the arts. Now, in region, I don't view Urbino as a town necessarily, but as the headquarters for the region's evil team. I'm not gonna say too much about them just yet, as I don't want to spoil anything major from the story section, but what I will say is that the evil team I thought of for this region is linked heavily with Italy's art and culture, and I could think of no better place for their hideout to be than a large Renaissance-inspired castle based on Urbino. Alright, getting back to our journey through the region, if you return to the Tuscan countryside village and travel north, you'll be met with a route inspired by Italy's Ancona Desert. Once you've made it through the desert route, you'll find yourself in a medium-sized town based on Florence. Florence, sometimes referred to as the City of Lilies, is thought of as the birthplace of the Renaissance, which was the big artistic movement that happened in the 1300s. Many famous Renaissance-era creators, such as Leonardo da Vinci, Uccello, Ghiberti, and Donatello, were either born in Florence or lived here at some point in their life. And there are still hundreds of paintings, statues, and other creations from the historic past on display within the town. I think the Pokemon version of Florence could reflect the Renaissance nature of the real-life city with a lot of its points of interest, and I imagine there being a large river running through the town based on the river Arno, which would have a bridge resembling Ponte Vecchio going over it. There would be a massive building based on the Florence Cathedral, including the iconic red-tiled dome and Giotto Tower, which you could climb up. One of the regional professor's labs would be here, which we'll talk about later, but actually makes a lot of sense, because the professor is based heavily on the polymath artist Leonardo da Vinci. There would of course be a large art museum within the town based on Uffizi Gallery, where you would see many famous paintings within the Pokemon world. And if you want to take a breather from all of these iconic places, you could find a small pathway that would take you to a hill on the outskirts of town that's inspired by Piazzale Michelangelo, and would be a small square that overlooks the city and has an incredible view. When it's finally time to leave Florence, if you travel left, this will take you through a route that features a lot of rocky terrain, and also has a marble quarry inspired by the marble industry of a city in Italy called Carrara. The idea here is that marble has been mined from this quarry for thousands of years, and used in this Pokemon region's art and buildings for centuries. When you've made it through this route, you'll find yourself in a small ruin area that's partially based on the city of Pisa. This area would have elements from the real-life city within it, such as a giant climbable tower based on the Leaning Tower of Pisa, as well as ruins based on the Baths of Nero, but the entire area would have more of an old ruin feeling to it and would be a side area you can explore rather than a full-blown town. In region, this area would be a place where many people come from far and wide to see the mysterious Leaning Tower, and for those who are strong enough trainers, you can actually work your way through the maze-like ruins and climb the tower for yourself. Now, from these ancient ruins, you can access a water route that will let you surf along part of Italy's coast. And when you've made it through the beach-like environment, you'll arrive at a small water Pokemon preservation building that doubles as an aquarium. This is another location like Pisa that I had to reduce down from a city into a side area, and the original inspiration for it comes from a place in Italy called Genoa and the town's large aquarium. The overall idea with this area in the Pokemon world is that this would be a place where wild water-type Pokemon that are injured are taken in, healed up, and then released back into the wild. After looking at all the water Pokemon that are being cared for, you continue your journey and you find yourself in a town based on Milan, which is the second largest city in Italy right after Rome. Milan is viewed as one of the fashion capitals of the world, as the city produces and retails various clothing alongside hosting awards and events related to the modern Vogue, and the city has a major influence on fashion trends throughout the world. Obviously, there's more to Milan than just fashion, but when it came to making a Pokemon town based on Milan, I felt like the fashion and modern part of the city is what would translate into the Pokemon world the best, and that's what I focused on when creating this city. I think this Milan-inspired town would mostly be based around Quadrilatero della Moda, which is one of the leading fashion districts in the town, and I think the city would have a large canopy-like cover over it, almost making it feel like a mall, which was installed so people's styles wouldn't be ruined by the weather. In terms of specific buildings here, you'd find many fashion-centric things such as various clothing stores, boutiques, hair salons, and even Pokemon fashion stores where you can buy accessories to dress your Pokemon up with. A large runway would be in the middle of town where daily fashion shows are held to showcase what's currently in for human and Pokemon Vogue, and a large cathedral-type building would also be in this town, which is inspired by the Milan Cathedral. Once you've stocked up on various pieces of clothing in the town, which I should have mentioned would not be cheap, you continue onward and travel west. This will take you to a town based on Turin, which is a really cool city in northwestern Italy that sits right below the towering Alps mountain range. Turin is well known for its refined architecture, cultural heritage, cuisine, and many museums, and some of the cool places I think could be in a Pokemon version of it is a building based on Mole Antonelliana, which is a large building that houses a museum dedicated to cinema. There would be another large building based on Museo Egizio, which is one of the world's best museums related to ancient Egyptian archaeology, which I think in this region could reference the Pokemon world's version of Egypt and have a special Yamask you can catch. And alongside the many smaller buildings, I also think there would be a specialty cafe where you can get a true Italian region-style pizza. Alright, from this Turin-based town, if you head north, you'll travel along a mountainous and snowy route until you run into a large, unclimbable mountain. There's a bunch of workers here that are trying to build a tunnel through the rocky hill, and this whole area is meant to be inspired by the Frejus Road Tunnel, which is a tunnel that connects Italy and France together. The idea here is that these workers are trying to build a tunnel between this region and the Kalos region, but unfortunately their progress is being slowed by a lot of wild Pokemon causing a ruckus. You can partially travel into the cave they've built so far and battle wild Pokemon and workers that are there, but unfortunately they haven't broken through to Kalos yet, so you won't be able to do much else here other than explore a partially dug cave. Since we've reached a dead end, let's go back to the Florence town and travel upwards. This will take you through a city based on Bologna, which would have an ancient trainer school within it that's based on the University of Bologna, and after earning a degree in Pokemon battling, you'll travel east, which will bring you to a city based on Venice. Kind of like Rome, I've always felt like Venice is one of the most well-known and recognizable places in Italy. The city is built across 118 small islands within the Venetian lagoon, and there's over 100 different canals and bridges running between them. This gives Venice an incredibly unique atmosphere where it actually feels like the buildings are built on the water itself, and what more, due to there not being a ton of cars in Venice, boats within the canal are the primary way people get around, which further helps emphasize its unique aesthetic. In terms of specific areas this Pokemon town could have, I think a large plaza based on Piazza San Marco, including the legendary St. Mark's Bell Tower, definitely has to be included because it's such a recognizable part of Venice. There would be a ton of small canals intertwined with the town that you can surf on with your water-type Pokemon, and in addition to them, there would also be a huge canal that cuts right through the city, which is based on Venice's Grand Canal. A large building based on Doge's Palace would rest right by the canal. There would be a couple small islands with no bridges that lead to them that you can either surf to or hitch a ride on a gondola taxi, one of which would be based on Isola di San Michele, which would contain a small cemetery and memorial, and the rest of the town would have numerous houses and buildings to fill in space and create a maze of alleyways and canals you can explore. One final thing I wanted to mention about Venice is that once a year the city holds the Carnival of Venice, where participants can dress up in elaborate clothing and distinctive Venetian masks to celebrate Italy's history and culture. I personally found this event to be really unique and cool, and so I decided to work it into the story in numerous ways. The region's evil team has designs that are very reminiscent of the carnival, and there's also a moment within the story where the Venice town is holding a masquerade ball. This is a pretty small thing to bring up when talking about Venice, but I wanted to make sure you guys knew about the carnival and its special characteristics, so you can look out for things inspired by it when we get into the story section later. When you decide to leave the Venice city, you can travel further east and discover a cave based on Grotta Gigante, which would be a side area that has a lot of powerful and rare Pokemon in it, and considering it's a dead end, let's go back through Venice and travel north once more. This will lead you up a very snowy and mountainous pathway, which is fitting because this corresponds to real-life Italy's Alps mountain range, and if you can scale the frozen tundra, you'll wind up in the northernmost city in the region, which is meant to resemble the Italian town of Bolzano. This is another one of the places I altered slightly from what it's like in real life because I picture Bolzano as this region's snow town and being entirely frozen over. Now it's worth mentioning that all the landmarks in this Pokemon town are still inspired by places in real life Bolzano, although they have much more of a colder spin on them. There would be a frozen river and waterfall that go through the middle of town, inspired by the Isak River, which is close to Bolzano. Numerous hiking trails would be scattered around the town in reference to the Oswald Promenade area, and I think the final notable place would be a large Pokemon Center that's reminiscent of a Franciscan friary. Okay, so this town is the highest point in the region, and naturally you probably want to speed down it and make a sonic boom, right? Well, I've got you covered, because the route that leads away from this town is actually the region's cycling road. Italy has such a huge history with cycling, so I decided to turn the route between the Bolzano and Milan towns into a very long cycling road and have it loosely be inspired by Italy's Stelvio Pass. Alright, so that's all the towns and locations that would be on the main landmass of this Italy Pokemon region. But before we switch over to the new Pokemon section, there's still a few other places I haven't gone over yet that I wanted to talk about. First up is this large island right at the bottom of the region just off the boot. This is the island of Sicily, and in this region I did something kind of crazy and turned the entire island into the home of the Pokemon League as well as Victory Road. A crazy idea, I know, but let me go through and explain it all because I think within context it's pretty neat. So the Pokemon League itself is located roughly here and is based on a collection of Greek ruins within Sicily called Valle dei Templi, or the Valley of Temples. The term valley is a little bit of a misnomer because all of these ancient temples are located high atop a ridge, and within this Italy region I imagine the Pokemon League building being based on the many ancient temples here, and is also on the highest point of the Sicily-based island. Now, why I wanted the Pokemon League to be based on the Valley of Temples in the first place is because it ties heavily into most of the Elite Four I created for the region as well as the Champion. I'll save a lot of this for when we go over the specific characters later, but most of the Pokemon League trainers are meant to be based on Roman/Greek gods. I really don't want to get into another history lesson because I feel like I've already given like 10 of them in the video already, but the ancient Romans borrowed a lot of elements from Greek culture for their own, and one of the things they incorporated into their own mythology was the Greek gods. Now the reason I bring this up is because I wanted to reference the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks' connection to each other in this way, and I thought it would be really cool if the Pokemon League itself was based on an ancient Greek temple and the Elite Four was based on Roman/Greek gods. Now, the idea of an ancient temple Pokemon League being run by trainers who are based on ancient Roman/Greek deities also plays into how the island's Victory Road works. Because these trainers are so battle-hardened and serious, they don't want to waste their time battling just any trainer who can make it through a cave. So they set up a Victory Road that has a couple extra rules compared to other regions to make it more challenging for trainers wishing to battle them. What exactly makes this Victory Road a trial? Well, not only is it pretty long in length, as it has a very roundabout pathway that takes you up to the Pokemon League, but the main challenge of it I mentioned earlier is that if you lose one battle while you're working your way through the route, then you not only have to start from the beginning of the road at the Palermo town, but any trainers you've beaten get reset and their Pokemon are healed back to full health. This means that you essentially have to get through the entire Victory Road in one fell swoop, battling all the trainers in a row. Now you can still use healing items, so it's not ridiculously impossible, but I feel like this additional rule makes the Italian Victory Road feel very challenging and befitting of this region's Roman god-themed Pokemon League. The last thing I wanted to mention about the Sicily-based island is that aside from housing the Pokemon League, there would also be a side location here based on Mount Etna. Mount Etna is an active volcano located on Sicily, and I think it could fit into this region as a side area you can partially explore while going through Victory Road. It's pretty normal and boring the first time you explore it, but if you return to it later in the post-game, then you'll find that it has some pretty interesting ties to the region's legendary Pokémon. Alright, so we've practically covered all the places you would go to and see during the course of your main journey through the game. So let's finish out our tour through the region by talking about somewhere you could only visit in the region's post-game. So once you've completed the main story of the Italy region, you'll gain access to a special boat that will take you to a small cluster of islands located roughly here. This area is partially based on the Pontine Islands, which is a small collective of islands just off the western coast of Italy, and within this region there would be 5 islands of various sizes you can surf between in reference to this real-life mini archipelago. These islands would have many rare and powerful Pokemon living on them, including some that you wouldn't even see on the mainland, and as far as the landmarks and features that could appear here goes, I think many ancient ruins would adorn the islands, which is a reference to how during the Roman era, a couple of Rome's emperors would use the Pontine Islands as a place of banishment for criminals or troubling citizens, so I picture the Pokemon version of these islands having many old ruins that were built by the ancient Poke-Romans. One of the islands would have a somewhat modern warehouse built on it, which isn't a reference to anything in real life, but ties into the region's story I've created, and there would be a very rundown village on one of the smaller islands where a lone hermit is living. And these are all the places I think could be in an Italy Pokemon region. There is a lot here, like this might be the densest Pokemon region I've ever made, but Italy just has so many awesome and historic places to it that I really tried to fit as much as I could into the region. I know I couldn't get everything in here, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of comments about how I missed some cool places or landmarks, but I think that with what I did end up including, I did a pretty good job at representing Italy's historic past, Renaissance era, and modern times within this Italian Pokemon region. Let's now talk about some of the new Pokemon that could be found in an Italy-based region. With so much history and culture to Italy, I wound up having a lot of different places and things to draw upon for new Pokemon ideas. Some of the things I looked to for inspiration were the real-life animals that live in Italy, creatures from Roman mythology and legends, and I even looked a little bit at Italy's Renaissance period for new Pokemon ideas too. In the end, I came up with 37 new Pokemon that could inhabit the region. 9 regional variants, 16 common Pokemon, 3 starter Pokemon with their evolutions, 2 legendaries, and 1 mythical Pokemon. As always, I'll make sure to go over what the Pokemon is based on, its typing, and what abilities it could have as well. Alright, let's kick this section off officially and begin with possible regional variants that could be in an Italy Pokemon region. Now as always, I have to clarify that at this point in time we have no idea if regional Pokemon variants, such as Alolan forms, will continue on with the franchise moving forward. Assuming they do, however, and that we'll continue to see awesome versions of Pokemon that have adapted to different regions and environments, these are all the ideas I have for possible Italian regional variants. Okay, so first up we have regional variants for Skiddo and Go-Goat that are pure ice type and are based on the Alpine Ibex. The Alpine Ibex is a wild goat found throughout the snow-covered Alps and is great at traversing the rugged and mountainous terrain of its habitat. I thought having ice-type variants of the Skiddo line would be a great way to reference not only this mountain-climbing goat and the snowy environments found in northern Italy, but also help show how close this Italy region and the nearby Kalos region would be by giving a Kalos native Pokemon a regional variant. For their abilities, they would have Thick Fat, which halves the damage they take from fire and ice-type attacks, and they'd also have Slush Rush, which boosts the Pokemon's speed if the weather is hailing. The next regional variant is a bug grass-type variant of Heracross based on the Rosalia longicorn. This is a beetle found within Italy's forests and is often recognized by the fact that it feeds off of the pollen in flowers and makes its home in trees and bark. As you can tell, this is a type of beetle that's very in tune with foliage and flora, and I thought giving Heracross, one of Pokemon's resident beetle Pokemon, a grass bug type variant to represent this worked out surprisingly well. For its ability, I think it could have Sap Sipper. Next up, I'm getting a little bit crazy here, but I've actually created a regional variant for one of my original Pokemon in another region. In my England Pokemon region, I introduced Peblet and Mudtruff, which were Pokemon meant to embody the idea of the Roman invasion of England. And considering Italy is the home of the Romans, I felt it would be appropriate to give my own Fakeamon regional variants. Previously, they were both ground-type Pokemon, but their Italian regional variants are actually pure steel types. Their designs are more reminiscent of Roman gladiator armor, and their typing is meant to reference how the Romans were fierce warriors who used steel weapons. Their abilities this time around are Steel Worker as well as Heavy Metal. The next group of new Pokemon to get regional variants is the Spritzy line, in which they become dark poison types. For these variants, I was heavily inspired by Spritzy and Aromatease's original design inspiration, which is loosely inspired by the plague doctors in France and Italy during the time of the Black Plague, but I took it in a slightly different direction. While the original Spritzy line is meant to embody more of the fragrances the plague doctors carried with them to hopefully not catch the plague, I wanted this Italian regional variant to more so represent the actions a plague doctor would take to try and heal somebody. These variants' whole vibe is that they want to help and heal other Pokemon, but they use very experimental and somewhat harsh methods to do so. They emit a pungent odor that supposedly helps some Pokemon recover, and they're very adept at creating their own potions which can either help or hurt people depending on the situation. Their ability would also tie into the idea of a plague doctor, and they would have a brand new one called Quarantine, which makes it so that any Pokemon with a status condition cannot be switched out as long as Spritzy or Aromatise are on the field. The final variants I thought of for the region are Fire Ghost type variants of Yamask and Cofagrigus. These variants are inspired by many of the large Roman coffins that have been unearthed over the years, and their partial fire typing comes from the idea of Pompeii. We talked about this in the location section, but Pompeii was an old Roman town that sat at the base of the volcanic Mount Vesuvius, before it erupted and covered Pompeii in debris. Maybe this is kind of morbid, but I thought it would be interesting for these partially fire-type Yamask and Cofagrigus variants to be born from a Mount Vesuvius-type eruption within the region. I won't go into graphic details, but after the Pompeii-inspired area of this region was destroyed by a volcanic eruption, these Pokemon suddenly appeared in the area. For these variants' abilities, I think Magma Armor, which prevents the Pokemon from becoming frozen, could fit well, and then they would also have Mummy as a hidden ability. Switching over now to the next category of new Pokemon for this region, we come to the common Pokemon. These are the new Pokemon you would see all throughout your journey in the Italy region and aren't quite as rare as a legendary or even a starter Pokemon. The first Pokemon to talk about is a creature and its evolution based on the invention designs made by the legendary Renaissance man Leonardo da Vinci. While da Vinci was an accomplished artist during Italy's Renaissance period, he also had many interests beyond just the physical arts. He made music, wrote poems, studied math and literature, and of course designed numerous inventions. This Pokemon line is heavily based on the many flying machine concepts Leonardo made, with the first form being a normal flying type, and where the concept takes a little bit of a right turn from what you might expect is that its evolution adds in a couple elements from the War Machine sketch Da Vinci made, and becomes a fighting flying type. For this line's ability, they would have a new one called Redesign, which makes it so that if one of these Pokemon's attacks misses, then their attack stat is raised by one stage. The next line of new Pokemon for the region is the early game bird Pokemon you would encounter on the first couple routes. These Pokemon are based on a bird found commonly in Europe and Italy called the European Bee-Eater, which is well known for its inherent need to tunnel and dig. I wanted these Pokemon to reference this bird's earth-inclined nature, so I decided that this avian Pokemon line would actually start out as a pure ground type, and then by its final evolution would become a ground-flying type Pokemon. I thought this was a really cool way to reference the Bee-Eater's real-life digging characteristics, and also do something a little bit different with the early game bird of the region. Ability-wise, these Pokemon would rock a new one called Pecking Order, which increases the damage they do to Bug-type Pokemon. Next up, we have a Water Ghost-type Pokemon based on a basking shark. This is a shark commonly found in the Mediterranean Sea that has a very unique look to it, where it has a massive gaping mouth with gill rakers inside that it uses to filter feed and catch plankton to eat. Originally, the basking shark Pokemon I had for this region was a pure water type, but as I continued to develop the region, I wanted this Pokemon to be just a little bit more exciting. I decided to give it a secondary typing of Ghost, which isn't really based on anything specifically, but I thought a spectral shark that filter feeds off of human and Pokemon souls sounded horrifyingly awesome for this Italian Pokemon region. For its ability, this ghost shark would have a brand new one I named Spectral Filter, which makes it so that any attacks this Pokemon makes against an organic Pokemon, meaning something made out of living matter, have a life-stealing effect to them. Moving on, we come to a Pokemon and its evolution inspired by the Caladrius, which is a bird in Roman mythology that lives in a king's house and is said to heal people by taking their sicknesses into itself and then dispersing them. For this Pokemon line's ability, and this is probably pretty obvious, but they would definitely have Healer, which will let the Pokemon cure an ally's status condition. Coming up next, we have one of my favorite new Pokemon in the region, which is a giant normal dark-type monster based on a Basilisk. The Basilisk is a creature from Italian folklore that looks somewhat reminiscent of a goat, albeit a very scary and monstrous one, and is said to live in a large valley within the Alps mountain range. The legend of the Basilisk is pretty long and extensive, so I won't go through the entire thing, but to summarize it briefly, the Basilisk is a monster that lives in the woods and is said to constantly annoy the local people of the valley. Once a year, the locals get so fed up by the obnoxious nature of the beast that they capture it and bring it back to their village so they can engage in many activities with it, such as having a duel with the creature, reading the Basilisk's speech, which is comprised of gossip about the town, and then finishing up by having a large feast and dance. After this, the Basilisk is set free to once again annoy the village until next year when it is captured once more. That's an incredibly compact overview of the Basilisk, and as you might have guessed by the art on screen right now, the obnoxious element of it is what I decided to focus on for this Pokemon. The Pokemon version of the Basilisk is something of a prankster and plays many jokes on humans and Pokemon alike that can really get on your nerves rather quickly. The next two common Pokemon you would see throughout the Italy region are part of the same evolution line and are based on Cacus, a fire-breathing giant in Roman mythology. These Pokemon are slightly different than Cacus, as I turn them into Cyclopes to make them feel more monstrous, but they are pure fire type, which is a direct reference to the mythical Roman giant. Ability-wise, they would have Flash Fire, which powers up their fire type moves if they're hit by one, and Flare Boost would be their hidden ability. Alright, let's talk about a couple new Pokemon for this region that are actually pretty special because they're the region's fossil Pokemon. I only put one fossil Pokemon in here with its evolution, and the two of them are based on the prehistoric Megadontosuchus, which was a crocodile-type monster that roamed Italy long ago. I didn't want to cross over into territory that some of the official crocodile Pokemon have covered, like Sandile or Totodile, so these fossil Pokemon would be rock grass types and have Chlorophyll or Strongjaw as their abilities. The final three common Pokemon that would be in this region are all part of the same evolution line, and what more, are the pseudo-legendaries for the game. This line of Pokemon would be very comparable to other pseudo-legendaries out there, such as Garchomp, Dragonite, or Hydreigon, and their stats would be very comparable to them. As far as what these Pokemon are based on, they're heavily inspired by the Hippocampus, which is a mythical water horse within Roman, Greek, and many other mythologies. This creature is often seen in many art pieces from the Renaissance, such as the Trevi Fountain, and has also been used on the coat of arms for things with maritime associations. With ties to Roman mythology, the Renaissance period, plus being used in modern day things, I thought the Hippocampus could make for a rad pseudo-legendary within this region. It would start out as a pure water type, but by its final stage would become a water fairy that's ready to flood its opponents out to sea. Okay, the next section of new Pokemon I want to cover is the region's starter Pokemon. These are the Pokemon you receive at the start of the game and would be your very first traveling companion to accompany you through the Italy region. Each of these three Pokemon are based on real-life animals found in Italy, but in addition to that, they're each meant to represent a different area of the country. We didn't go over this a ton in the geography section, but Italy is often split up into three sectors: Northern Italy, Central Italy, and Southern Italy. And these starter Pokemon are each meant to embody a different section of Italy and are based on a creature that's common in the area. This will make a lot more sense as we go through everything, so let's hop to it and take a look at the Italy region's fire starter. This starter is a fire-type goat and is meant to represent northern Italy. As we talked about earlier, mountain goats are very common in northern Italy, especially in the Alps mountain range, and so I felt like one of the starters being based on an alpine goat made a lot of sense. I felt like it being a fire type was a given, as mountain goats have very aggressive natures and will often fight each other for territory, and this Pokemon line specifically starts out as a pure fire type before getting more and more territorial and aggressive, eventually becoming a fire ground type by its final evolution. For the fire starter's ability, it would have Blaze, which every fire starter has, and its hidden ability would be Rockhead. The second starter of the region is the water starter, which represents southern Italy. This starter is partially based on the fire salamander, which is found throughout Europe, and the Pokemon has luminescent patterns in reference to the real-life animal. While I decided not to make this starter a fire type, I did decide to play up the idea of its luminescent patterns and made it so that this starter has an inner electrical power that causes it to glow. By its final form, it becomes a full-on water-electric type and uses its long, goopy tongue to drench enemies in a paralyzing saliva. Ability-wise, this salamander Pokemon line would have Torrent, and its hidden ability would be Volt Absorb. Alright, the final starter for this region is a grass-type bear Pokemon which corresponds to Central Italy. Central Italy is home of the Apennine mountain range, and one of the most prolific Italian animals, the Apennine brown bear, is known to inhabit them, which is where the idea for this starter came from. It would be a somewhat bulky Pokemon that remains a pure grass type throughout all of its evolutions, which I'm sorry because I know some people are going to be a little bit disappointed by that, and for its abilities it has Overgrow normally and Tough Claws as a hidden ability. Looks like we finally arrived at the last group of new Pokemon for the region, the Legendaries. These are the Pokemon that stand high above the rest of the Pokemon in the region, not necessarily in terms of stats, but also in overall importance to the Pokemon world and this Italian region. So let's wrap up the new Pokemon section in style and take a look at the possible Legendaries that could be in this region. So the two big legendaries for this Italian region are tied heavily to ancient Rome. One of them is based on a prominent symbol within Rome, which we'll talk about in a second, while the other is inspired by a creature from an ancient legend about the founding of Rome. This is the one I wanted to talk about first, and so you get a better idea of where the inspiration came from, I'll briefly go through the legend of Rome's founding. Okay, so in Roman mythology, there's a legend about two brothers named Romulus and Remus, who are the grandnephews of a king named Amulus. Fearing that Romulus and Remus would eventually overthrow him, Amulus ordered them to be killed, and so the twin brothers were abandoned in the wilderness by the river Tiber. They were eventually saved by Tiberinus, the god of the river, and through the help of many other individuals, they were cared for and lived to adulthood. There's a lot more to this legend, such as when Romulus and Remus kill Amulus and set out to build their own city named Rome, before a disagreement between the brothers formed, which caused Remus to be killed, but the inspiration for the legendary I mentioned earlier was actually within the first part of the story. During the years Romulus and Remus were being cared for, one of the beings that helped and cared for them was a she-wolf. Romulus and Remus were said to have nursed from the creature, and this is by far the most well-known story from the legend of Rome's founding. Due to the she-wolf's importance in this story, and that, when you think about it, she basically helped create Rome by saving Romulus and Remus, I felt like this creature would make for a great inspiration for an Italian region legendary. Its typing would be ground steel, and its history within the region is that it's helped people construct cities and build civilizations peacefully for thousands of years. To reference the mythical she-wolf's helpful nature, this legendary would have a brand new ability I'm calling Maternal Protection, which allows the wolf to create a barrier as it is being switched out that the next Pokemon called in can use. This barrier increases the Pokemon's defense stat by 2 stages and their special defense by 1. Alright, moving over to the second legendary of the region, we have a monster that is practically the polar opposite of the she-wolf Pokemon, at least in terms of what it represents. It's based on an eagle, which was a very important symbol to ancient Rome, being used on flags and even being carried into battle by the Roman Legion, and this Pokemon is also meant to embody the idea of imperialism. Imperialism is an ideology that the ancient Roman Empire very clearly abided by, and basically it's the idea of building civilizations by conquering others, or forcing countries to submit to your rule. Ancient Rome was very good at this, as there was a point in time when most of Europe was under Roman control, and this legendary is meant to represent that kind of aggressive takeover philosophy. Its ability would also help reinforce this Pokemon's need for combat and would be a new one called Gladiator. This ability works exactly like the Moxie ability does, and whenever this battle-thirsty eagle KOs a Pokemon, its attack stat is raised. Alright, the final legendary Pokemon in this region is actually a mythical Pokemon inspired by Italy's Renaissance-era sculptures. This Pokemon would be a rock ground type, and what makes it so special is that it was supposedly the big inspiration behind this Italy region's artistic movement. This Pokemon has the ability to manipulate earth and stone at will, and long ago many famous artists in the region saw this monster create beautiful sculptures, and were so inspired by it that they set out to try and create their own art. For its ability, it would have Serene Grace. Okay, so one really quick thing I wanted to bring up regarding these regions' legendaries is that I did something kind of different with them in the story section, because I made the mythical of the region the focus of the main story, while the eagle and she-wolf have more of a presence in the post-game. We'll be going over this extensively in the story section, which is coming up next, but I wanted to give you guys an early heads up that I changed things around a little bit with this region, but I think it all really comes together and helps reinforce the main themes and ideas that play out within the region's narrative. And these are all the new Pokemon I think could be in an Italy Pokemon region. There's quite a lot of them, but I really wanted to try and represent a lot of different facets pertaining to Italy. There's Pokemon based on Roman mythology, some that are inspired by the Renaissance era, and a lot that are just based on animals within present-day Italy too. Hopefully I was able to do the animals and creatures of Italy justice and make some cool Pokemon for this region. Now that we know all about the locations and new Pokemon that could inhabit an Italian region, let's finish up the video by talking about the potential story and narrative that could be present and some of the important characters you would get to meet. If this is your first regional video of mine that you're watching, it's worth noting right up front that I tend to go a little overboard with the stories in my regions. And now that all my videos are connecting together in a buddyverse of sorts, this region's story will be no exception. Consider this a warning that what you're about to watch is super fanfiction-y, extremely long, and filled with all sorts of cheesy and over-emotional dialogue, but if I'm being honest, I wouldn't have it any other way for my regional videos. Now, before I get into the bulk of the story I've created, I wanted to go over some of the key ideas and events relating to Italy's history that I drew upon for this region's narrative inspiration. There are 4 main things from Italian culture I drew upon, and I briefly wanted to explain them so that when I'm going through the story you can see the various things I'm referencing. Okay, so the first big idea I looked to for story inspiration, and this won't come as a shock to anybody, was the idea of the ancient Romans and their civilization. We've been talking all throughout this video about the Romans and how their society in the past has affected Italy so much in the present, and I felt like I had to include some Roman flair when it came to the story. We talked about this a little bit in the location section, but what I decided to do to reference Romans in the region was bring back a group of people I introduced in a previous regional video. Team Imperium. For those that might not have seen my What If England Was a Pokemon Region video, Team Imperium is a group of people who are direct descendants from ancient Poké-Romans. The idea with the Poké-Romans is that their history parallels real-life history, and in the past they built a marvelous civilization in the Italy region before it fell to shambles, much like the real-life Romans' history. Now, unlike my England region, Team Imperium aren't the main bad guys in this Italian story. In fact, they aren't even villains at all. They're really more of a side quest in many aspects and are somewhat helpful in a very small way. That's all I'll say on them at the moment, and you'll get a lot more context as to why they aren't evil like they were previously as we go through the story. The next thing that influenced the story is Italy's history with the Renaissance. I've talked excessively about this historic time in Italy all throughout the video, so I won't go too deep into it, but what I will say, however, is that the idea of a big artistic renaissance is something I tried to incorporate heavily into the region's narrative, and the evil team you face off against is heavily inspired by the art and culture of the region. Alright, the third thing I took some very loose inspiration from for the story was the idea of the Italian Mafia. As I'm sure we're all aware of, Italy has many organized crime groups within it, and I wanted to not necessarily represent a specific real-life one, but rather, because the mob is a part of Italy's history as a country, somehow reference the general idea of them without offending them in this Italian Pokemon region. Instead of creating something brand new out of thin air, I decided to look to an idea Pokemon already made in the past: Team Rocket. You see, Team Rocket is based on a somewhat general depiction of a mob or organized criminal organization, and because they already exist in Pokemon's canon, I wanted to tie them into this region as a slight reference to Italy's real-life history with the Mafia. Thus, the Italian branch of Team Rocket was born. The post-game is really where this Italian Team Rocket shines and starts to do nefarious deeds you have to stop, so just keep that in mind as we go through the story. The final thing you'll see throughout the narrative is a small amount of Roman mythology references. We also talked about this briefly in the location section, but this region's Pokemon League is mostly made up of trainers inspired by Roman gods, and they play a small role within the story. Truth be told, they don't do anything amazing, but they do have a presence within the region, and maybe even set up a few plot points that will tie into future regional videos. Okay, I think that covers a general overview of all the ideas I tried to incorporate into this region's narrative in some form or another. It's a ton, I know, but I feel like they all play into each other pretty well to make an in-depth narrative, so sit back, grab your popcorn, and let me tell you the 30-page tale of this Italy region's story. Our story begins not in the past like so many of my regional videos do, but in the present day. At the start of the game, you and your mother have just arrived at the Italy region's Cagliari starting town and are standing on the dock admiring the village. You see, your family owns a small summer house on the island, and every summer you and your mother journey from a distant region to this Italian region's island on vacation. Your mom runs a small bike shop that's connected to your summer home, and while you've always helped her run it the past few times you've been here, this year you've decided that you're going to try your hand at being a Pokemon trainer and are going to challenge the region's Pokemon League. You and your mother depart from the dock and after a small walk arrive at your summer home, which is actually right above the bike shop your mom works at. After dropping off all your stuff and making yourself at home, or, well, summer home, your mother says that she's going to go check out the bike store and see how it's been faring since you guys were here last summer. Your mom leaves the room, and at this point you can wander around your summer home for as long as you want and discover a couple interesting things here. When you go downstairs into the bike store, you find that everything seems to be in order. A little dusty, which is to be expected from a building that hasn't been used in a year, but it looks like all the bikes and supplies are fine and things are right where they should be. Your mother has already started work on repairing an old-looking bike, and when she notices you're in the room, she excitedly hands you a letter.
You just got a letter in the mail, sweetie. It looks like it's from the professor I was telling you about on the way here.
You rip open the envelope while your mother looks on smiling, and you find that it is indeed from the Italy region's leading professor.
Why, hello there, young trainer-to-be. My name is Professor Cypress, and I've heard that you are interested in challenging the Pokemon League of our fair region. Well, I am here to help you. When you're ready to get started, meet me at the docks, and we can discuss everything about your future journey, including your starter Pokemon. Until then, best wishes. Professor Leo Cypress.
This is a very exciting letter to receive as it means you're truly on the verge of beginning your Pokemon journey, and in the excitement of the moment you jump up and start to rush out the door while your mother chuckles at your enthusiasm.
You're really not wasting any time in going out and living your dream, are you, dear? Well, I fully support your goal of being a Pokemon champion, so all I ask is that before you leave town, you come back here and say goodbye first. All right? Okay. Love you, sweetie. Go and get your first Pokemon now.
You promise to return and say farewell to your mother, and with her words of encouragement still resonating with you, you run down to the village's docks. When you arrive, you see a man in somewhat ornate clothing gazing out across the sea.
Quite a nice day today, isn't it?
He turns his attention back to the waves and writing in his notebook, and when he notices you're still standing there, he's curious what you're looking for. You introduce yourself to him, and he says, somewhat embarrassed,
Benvenuto. I'd only heard about you from your mother, but never seen any pictures. Forgive my ignorance, child. I am Professor Leo Cypress, the resident researcher of this region, and the one who sent you the letter you no doubt received.
You nod in understanding, and the professor gives another lighthearted smile.
We'll have plenty of time to talk about the specifics of my studies, and how exactly I'll aid you on your journey in due time. But for right now, it should be about time that the other beginning trainer arrives too.
You're curious what exactly he means by that, and at that moment you hear a loud, thunderous engine in the distance. A very sleek-looking boat is cruising to the port, and you and Professor Cypress observe it as it docks right next to you. Two very large men with black suits, earpieces, and sunglasses step out of the boat, and a younger boy dressed in rather fashionable clothing follows right behind them. They look around the dock, somewhat unimpressed, and after the boy spots you, he shoos the two men away somewhat rudely while standing in a very cool pose. There's a somewhat awkward silence as you and Professor Cypress wait for the boy to walk over to you, and after it's clear he isn't going to move, you and the professor walk over to him. The professor introduces himself and asks if he's Marco, the beginning trainer who was also going to be given a starter and advice from him, and that apparently strikes a nerve with the boy as he lashes out.
It's not like I need advice from you, perdente. I only came here to get a free Pokemon, but that's it. I'm gonna be a great trainer without any of your dumb help.
Both you and Cypress are a little taken aback by this outburst, and the boy presses on and says to you,
What are you looking at, loser? This is a private matter concerning my Pokemon training, and not just any street ratata can be here.
Well, about that, this here is another beginning trainer who's going to be receiving a starter from me too. Maybe some kind of friendly rivalry will be formed between the two of you. Although, now that I've met the both of you, I don't know if that's such a good idea.
Marco seems to take a little bit of offense at that, and you can tell that he's going to rip into both you and the professor some more. But Cypress quickly looks at his watch and says,
Would you look at the time? We really better be getting this show on the road, eh? I brought the starter Pokemon with me, so please, Feel free to choose whichever you would like.
He pulls out a box that has 3 Pokeballs in it and motions for you and Marco to take one. Rather than jumping in and taking a starter immediately, Marco instead looks away indignantly. He notices you staring at him and rolls his eyes.
What? You think I'm gonna be the first one to choose a starter Pokemon so that you can have the one that's better than mine? No way! You're gonna choose first, and then I'm gonna make sure I get the one that'll beat yours every single time. That way you'll never forget what a pathetic trainer you are.
You end up giving in and pick your starter, and true to his word, Marco picks the one that's super effective against it. Professor Cypress says that
Traditionally, this is when you would have a battle with your new starter to form a bond with them. But, considering the unique circumstances, maybe we should save that for later, eh?
Stazito, old man! I'm going to show this kid what the hierarchy of our relationship is. I hope you're ready, player, cause me and my new Pokemon are going to rip you to shreds!
this begins not only your first Pokemon battle in the region, but also your first battle against Marco, who you might have already figured out is your main rival throughout the story. Unfortunately for Marco, because he is a Pokemon rival, he is destined to lose, and you proceed to destroy him and his starter with your chosen Pokemon. Once Marco has been beaten, he huffs and holds his head up high.
What a load of garbage. Of course I let you win because I have so much humility, so don't think this was a real victory for you or anything. You and your Pokemon are still pathetic, and if I ever give you the privilege of battling me again, I'll make sure to show you how weak you truly are.
Marco starts stomping away and Professor Cypress calls out to him. Marco turns around, scoffs at the professor, then leaves the docks without saying a word to no doubt start his journey across the region. It's only you and Professor Cypress on the dock now, and he gives a sigh of relief. He apologizes to you as he didn't know Marco was going to be that, difficult to talk to, and he asks you to come to his lab so he can give you a helpful item and a few other tips for your upcoming adventure. You go with him to his lab, and as soon as you walk in, you get a sense for what Cypress studies immediately. It's a very cramped laboratory, and there are numerous piles of books everywhere, and there's a lot of half-finished inventions on a work table in the middle of the room.
Even though it looks like a Pokemon used a whirlwind in here, I assure you, there is a method of organization to all of it that only I cannot see.
He chuckles at that, making you unsure if he really does have an organization method, but before you can ponder it anymore, the professor starts explaining what it is exactly that he does.
Most of the major Pokemon professors out there study things related to the biology of a Pokemon, but for myself, I've always been drawn more to things that help a Pokemon, but aren't necessarily an organic part of them. I've spent years researching and building devices and inventions that help a Pokemon. You've no doubt heard of Pokemon Centers before, right? Well, that technology that's able to heal them so rapidly was partially developed by me. I've also helped co-design a few items, such as the Experience Share, and even a few Pokeballs.
He then walks over to his work table and motions to a piece of cloth covering some kind of object. He pulls away the cover, and underneath is a somewhat high-tech looking bike helmet.
This is my latest invention. The high-powered electronic assistance and data gear, otherwise known as the headgear. I know it doesn't look like much, but please, try it on and tell me what you think.
At this point, you can try on the headgear, and once you're wearing it, a virtual display lights up in front of you. To break the fourth wall a little bit here, this is actually your main menu throughout the game. If you want to look at the map, or check your Pokemon, or browse the Pokedex, you can access all those things through the power of the headgear. After testing out your new wearable, the professor says that you get to keep it for your journey, but he only has that one prototype, so please don't break it. He also gives you an old Pokedex that feels really outdated in comparison, and asks that if you see Marco to please deliver it to him. He suggests that you travel north to the far side of the island as there's a gym leader over there, and he wishes you luck as you leave his lab to start your adventure. Well, almost start your adventure. You did promise your mother you would say goodbye before you leave, so you make a quick stop by the bike store. Your mother is inside, and the two of you have an emotional goodbye where your mom keeps it brief but uplifting.
I know this is what you want to do for your summer vacation, so just remember that I'll be right here supporting you every step of the way. In fact, I even got you a little going away gift. I hope every time you use it, you think of me cheering you on from back here at home.
Your mother reveals her gift to you, which is the old bike she was fixing up earlier in the shop. It matches the high-tech helmet Professor Cypress gave you, and you tell your mother thank you as you give her a hug goodbye. Alright, it's finally time for your Pokemon journey to truly begin. After going through Route 1, you'll find yourself in the Sunuroxi Ruins area. You can battle some trainers and tourists hanging around the outside of the area's large tower, and when you're ready, you can enter and explore the relatively small, decaying structure. While you're exploring the tower, you'll eventually stumble upon an ancient chamber with a blue-haired girl who appears to be studying an old picture carved into the wall. You can tell she's pretty important because her clothing looks reminiscent of an ancient Roman tunic, and as you approach her, she starts to talk to you while still examining the faded art.
Few people ever find this tower's chamber, so I'm rather impressed you're here. Tell me, when you look at the belongings and the creations that have been lost in time within this building, what do you see? Do you see long-forgotten art or boring trinkets? You sound genuine, although unsure. I know the feeling well. I didn't fully understand or appreciate the culture of civilizations long past until I reconnected with my own heritage.
She turns around and gives you a slight smile.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sophia, and I'm part of Team...
Suddenly, the wall Sophia was studying crumbles, and on the other side is Marco and his Pokemon, who are frozen in shock. It appears that Marco was exploring the tower too until he got lost and thought he would just use his Pokemon to break things and make a tunnel out of here.
Why are you here, reject? Didn't I tell you to stay away from me unless you wanted to get your Kula beat?
You really want to limit your time around Marco, so you quickly pull out the Pokedex Professor Cypress asked you to give him, to which Marco promptly snatches it away.
So that old guy wanted me to have this, huh? What a load of junk. Although I guess the map it has would have been nice earlier.
Marco starts fumbling around with his Pokedex, and Sophia turns to you and asks if this lost child is a friend of yours.
Lost? I know exactly where I'm going! I just have to blast through all the old gross walls in this building and I'll be outside in no time. I wouldn't expect someone who dresses in curtains to understand my genius style.
Sophia doesn't quite know what to say to that, but her hand instinctively goes to her belt and it looks like she's about to call out some Pokemon to smack Marco around. She stops herself though and solemnly sighs.
I can't go back to how I used to be. Alright, Marco, was it? It's clear you don't respect this building, nor the prehistoric humanities that are stored in it. But you can't just break down all the walls in this building to get out. If I show you the exit, will you at least promise to leave without breaking anything and never come back?
Marco snorts at this and gives a douchey shrug.
Yeah, whatever. My Pokemon and I are tired of working, so if you lead the way, maybe we'll follow you if we feel like it, Soph.
Sophia shudders at Marco's terrible personality, but seems somewhat content that she was at least able to stop him from breaking more of the tower. Sophia turns back to you and hands you a piece of a small coin that looks like it's been broken in half and has an eagle-like creature engraved on it.
It was very nice meeting you, trainer. Please, have this token to remember me by, and perhaps our paths will cross again.
Sophia leaves the ancient chamber and Marco follows right behind her. He doesn't say anything to you as he leaves, but he and his Pokemon bump into your shoulder and give you a sneer as they walk by. You're alone in the chamber now, and aside from a couple items you can discover, there isn't really much else to do here, and so you depart from the ruins and carry on with your journey. After going through Route 2, you'll find yourself in the Olbia-based town. Here you can battle the first gym leader, and after you earn their badge, you head back to Professor Cypress's lab to meet with the professor. He's overjoyed that you got your first badge and says that you're ready to move on to bigger and better things now. He took the liberty to arrange a boat to take you over to the mainland, and when you're ready, it'll be waiting for you at the docks. The professor also mentions that he's going to be returning to his main lab at the Florence-based city, so when you make it to the northern part of the region, you should drop by and say hello. You promise to visit him, and after this you leave the lab, go down to the docks, and board the boat that's waiting for you. After a very long boat ride, you make port at a small area in the southern part of the region, and from here you travel north, which leads you to the Matera-inspired city. There's not a whole lot you can do here when you arrive initially, so you continue traveling the only way the game lets you, which takes you northeast to the Ostuni city. When you arrive at the town, you see that half the buildings are pure white, while the other half have been painted a variety of different colors. You notice some villagers nearby and ask them what's happening, and they say that their city was region-renowned for its white paint aesthetic, but some vandals arrived and ruined it by painting all the buildings garish colors. As the hero of the region, you can't just sit idly by at this minor felony, and so you follow a path of painted buildings through the town until you bump into a couple strangers in an alleyway. They're wearing very old Venetian-style clothing, including ornate masks, but probably the most important detail about them is that they're using their Pokemon to quote-unquote paint a building by using its poison and sludge attacks. The vandals notice you walking their way, and one of them quickly rushes towards you to block your path. "Stop! You can't come through here because we're busy painting the buildings!" You give a quizzical look to the person, and the other vandal stops what they're doing and runs over to try and deter you as well. Before you know it, you're flung into a battle against the vandals, who are officially known as Team Esteta. Now, a quick aside, but Team Esteta is the evil team you'll be fighting against during the main story of the region. The name Esteta comes from the Italian word for aesthete, which is somebody who has a special appreciation of art, and I found that that really represents their whole motive. They feel like the region has lost touch with its sense of art and culture, and they're trying to bring it back by inspiring the region with their own somewhat destructive art. Visually, Team Esteta was heavily inspired by the Carnival of Venice, which we talked about in the location section, and the members use a blend of normal, poison, fairy, and ground-type Pokemon, which is meant to represent different attributes of art. All the members of Team Esteta use these types of Pokemon, and the grunts specifically use things like Smeargle, Gulpin, Spritzee, Rhyhorn, and Sandshrew. You battle the grunts, and after they've been defeated, they try to run away but end up running straight into a wall and fall to the ground. The grunts are tight-lipped about where their commanding authority is, but thankfully you can just follow the buildings they've painted, which provides a great trail. As you follow the colorful pathway, you'll battle a few more Team Esteta grunts until you arrive at the city's plaza. The fountain in the center of town has been painted heavily and is spewing colored water, while a person wearing an extravagant mask and outfit is standing in front of it observing everything quietly. As you run into the courtyard, the mysterious person stares at you and then looks behind you and sees that you've taken out all of the Esteta grunts. The person gives a heavy sigh and starts to slowly walk towards you.
Even though our cause is just as it seems, the people only see us as villains. They tried to warn me this would happen, but I thought the region was ready to accept a wake-up call. It appears not.
He's now right in front of you and is a towering man with a deep, booming voice.
Ah, where are my manners? Just because I'm now seen as a villain doesn't mean I can't show common courtesy. My name is Federico, the leader of the group you just battled, called Team Esteta. On the surface, we might seem like common vandals, but I assure you that our ambitions are much greater. This region was once the pinnacle of art and aesthetic, before turning into the disrespectful and ignorant heap it is now. And our goal is to remind this region of the humanity buried deep within its bloodline.
You instinctively get into a battle stance, as this guy did just say he was a villain, and Federico grimaces. He gives a quick hand signal to an unseen person and then starts walking away. You're puzzled by this and go to pursue him when out of nowhere a small purloin hisses and jumps out of the shadows. Except it's not a purloin but another member of Team Esteta. The child is laughing hysterically at you and through their fit of giggles tries to talk.
Did you think I was a Pokemon? That's so funny! No, I'm something far worse than a wild Pokemon attacking you. I'm one of Team Esteta's admins. Tempera is my name, and knocking down wannabe trainers like you is my game. For beauty, for art, for Team Esteta!
As quickly as Tempera appeared, you're then roped into a battle against her. On Team Esteta, admin Tempera's first team, she uses a Nidorina, Grimer, and Purloin, and once you've beaten her, she starts to make crying sounds. It's kinda hard to tell if she's actually crying underneath her mask, but she lets out a sobbing wail and yells to the Team Esteta grunts that it's time to leave. As the grunts are being rallied, Tempera calls you a meanie, and the screen fades to black. When it fades back in, the town is still a luridly painted mess, but Team Esteta is gone and the villagers have started coming out of their homes to have a look around. At this point, you can go and challenge the village's gym leader, who I'm sure had a really good reason for not helping fight Team Esteta, and after you've earned their badge, you leave the town behind and head back to Matera. When you arrive in Matera the second time around, you actually see Marco far below you on another level of the city. He's looking around cautiously with his trademark scowl and appears to be heading towards the southeastern gate. You're not sure where exactly he's going, and while it might not be the best idea, seeing as how the town gate that leads north is still closed, you decide to follow him and see what he's up to. As you follow Marco, you'll go down a winding route that leads you to the small Cosenza-inspired area. There's no gym to challenge here, so you're curious what your rival is up to, and that's when you see him approach a large gate in front of a stately mansion. He rings a buzzer on the gate and waits for some kind of response, but no reply ever comes. He gives a solemn sigh as he turns around and is surprised, then immediately furious that you're here.
What are you doing here? Don't tell me you followed me, perdente. If he sees that. No, that isn't going to happen. I'm going to make you pay for stalking me, so get ready to lose, you miserable no-life!
Suddenly, the gates of the mansion open and a tall, dark, mysterious, and somewhat sexy figure emerges. The figure approaches the two of you and speaks in a calm but vaguely menacing voice.
Ah, so this is the rival you were telling me about, Marco. Doesn't seem like much, so it should be an easy task for you to defeat them, right?
Marco is strangely quiet at the man's comment and also seems to be somewhat embarrassed, which is an unusual sight.
Always forgetting your manners, aren't you, boy? I am Antonio, Marco's father.
Marco is looking down and gritting his teeth. It's clear he wants to say something, but is trying his best to hold it back.
I've heard all about you from my weakling son, player. It seems you're a better trainer than him in every way, and have even earned 2 gym badges. My oh my, that's very impressive. Marco here only has 1, don't you, son?
Marco's grimace is reaching an almost painful level now as he stifles a nod to his old man's question. His hands are slowly being balled up into fists, and it looks like he's getting ready to explode. Antonio catches this out of the corner of his eye, and a knowing smirk forms on his face as he continues talking.
Since Marco keeps disappointing me, we might just have to send him back to his mother. She tried to tell me that he wasn't good enough to be a Pokemon trainer, and I see now that I should have listened. What kind of weakling would pick that Pokemon as a starter anyways? Clearly not one that I would even consider working with. In fact, the player here seems much stronger than you, Marco. Maybe I'll have to take them on as my new apprentice, eh?
Ah! No! That's enough! I'll show you that I can do this, Dad! I'm strong enough to beat a whip like this and join you!
Marco stares you down with a frenzied look and calls out his Pokemon. It's very clear some kind of fire has been ignited within Marco, and seeing as how there's really no way you can say no to his challenge, you also call out your Pokemon, which begins your second battle against your rival. On his team this time around, he has the second form of the starter that's super effective against yours, a Goomy, a Houndour on the verge of evolving, and the second form of the Italy region's bird Pokemon. In what is a rather painful sequence to write, Marco ends up succumbing to you and your Pokemon strength and fails to beat you in front of his father. Marco is crushed and drops to his knees, and Antonio is moderately surprised. Not at his son losing, but at your immense skill as a trainer.
It seems you're still weak, Marco. I had high hopes for you when you said you wanted to become strong enough to join me, but it seems you played me for a fool.
Antonio glances to you and says,
You are quite strong. Please, join me in my estate and let us talk.
Not really having an excuse to get out of this awkward situation, you join Antonio and start walking away from Marco, who is still kneeling on the ground. The gate starts to close behind you, and Marco looks up at you and his father walking away. For a brief moment, his tear-stained eyes meet yours before the gate closes shut. Alright, it's gonna be hard to continue the story after all this drama, but I'm gonna try my best to keep going. So at this point, Antonio takes you on a tour of his large estate. He shows you his Platinum Garden, where he's imported many rare Pokemon from out of the region, and his tour finishes at his home, which is a very large mansion. It's here that Antonio talks to you a little bit and reveals that he runs a large organization within the region that focuses on, let's say region stability. Marco has wanted to join him for years, but unfortunately he feels that Marco just isn't strong enough to hold his own against other people within the group. Antonio laments that Marco's been trying for years to become strong enough to join him, but he just isn't there yet, which is part of the reason why Antonio pushes him so hard. He looks deep in thought for a moment and says,
With your inherent skill, I'm sure you'll be a great member of my organization, but alas, I try to keep the higher positions locked to family only. Although if you want, I'm sure I could put in a good word for you with the Kanto branch of my company. They're always looking for strong trainers. Haha, no more time for questions, eh? Feel free to visit my estate anytime you like. I'm so busy that I rarely get to use it myself, so it'd be nice to know that somebody can appreciate its many luxuries.
Antonio gets up to go to his study and work on definitely not illegal things, and since he invited you to, you can explore his mansion and garden even further. When you've had your fill of battling chefs and maids in his palace and finding his garden's secret cave, you'll leave his estate and find that Marco has long since left the gate. You return to your regularly scheduled Pokemon journey and travel back to the Matera location, go through the Mount Vesuvius-inspired route, earn a gym badge in the Naples town, and eventually arrive at the Rome-influenced city. When you first strut into town, there's all sorts of sights to see and activities to do. But what really catches your eye is a man and his Pokemon talking to two guards dressed in Roman clothing right in front of the entrance to the massive Vatican-inspired building. You walk over to see what's going on, and you briefly hear a little bit of their conversation. "You know the rules, Ogin. We can't just let you wander into the building even though you are a member of the Elite Four. You have to prove your worth just like everybody else." The man, apparently known as Ogin, grumbles at this, and him and his Pokemon shuffle away in shame. They bump into you accidentally, and the man apologizes. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. I was just trying to get into that building over there and visit an old friend, but not even I, a member of the Elite Four, can enter without passing their little test." He then notices a glimmer from your bag, and seeing that his interest is piqued, you take out the broken coin that Sophia gave you on the starting island. "Oh, it seems you've already earned part of Team Imperium's favor." He sees your confusion at his words and says, "Ah, so you don't know much about Team Imperium, I take it. I'll leave the long explanations to them, but the town's gym leader lies in that building, and in order to enter it, you'll need to have a complete coin. If you want to get the other piece you're missing, I'd try going to the old Coliseum in town and proving your strength." Ogin seems like he's being honest with you, and it looks like you're gonna have to go to the town's Coliseum if you want to enter the Vatican-inspired building and confront the gym leader. You thank Ogin for his advice, and you set out for the old Coliseum. When you arrive, you see many people dressed like old Romans who you assume to be members of this Team Imperium group, and one of the higher-ranking members gives you a rundown of what exactly you'll be doing in this Coliseum-inspired area. Basically, you'll be thrown into an arena and have to battle through 10 waves of challenges. If you successfully make it through the 10 waves, you'll earn a special item, which is the aforementioned coin that will let you access the town's gym in the Vatican-inspired area. You sign up for the Coliseum's Poke Gladiator Challenge, and after trekking through 9 waves of battles, you arrive at the 10th and final trial. You expect some kind of boss to appear, maybe even a totem Pokemon, and are shocked when none other than Sophia shows up. She gives you a knowing smile and says that she always knew you'd make it here. You and Sophia have a gladiator-style Pokemon duel for the coin, and on Sophia's team she uses a Dragalge, Crobat, and Minun. Once beaten, Sophia is very happy for you and gives you the other half of the coin you're missing. Sophia congratulates you and your Pokemon for such a great victory, and as she's leaving the arena says that she'll meet you at the town's gym. After asking if the audience was entertained, to which you get a few thumbs up, you head back to the guards in front of the Vatican building and show them your new ancient coin. They nod and step aside, and you walk past them into a vast plaza. And you make your way up a massive staircase that takes you to the main building in the area, which is visually inspired by St. Peter's Basilica. Inside is a large gallery-type area. Many paintings, statues, and old artifacts are neatly organized into rows, and at the far end of the room is a man clad in a flowing Roman tunic. He's wearing an elegant Venetian mask and stands up to address you. "I am the Grand Emperor of Team Imperium and the gym leader of this town, Julius. Though you may have proven your appreciation of ancient Poke-Roman culture and have a symbol that they once used, I get the feeling that you don't truly understand them or why Team Imperium feels so connected to them. Come, child, let me give you a small glimpse at our history before we battle." Julius whisks you away into the depths of the museum side of the gym, and as you browse the various relics, he enlightens you on Team Imperium and the Poke-Roman's legacy within the region. 3 millennia ago, a group of people and their Pokemon built an incredible civilization. This was the empire of the Poke-Romans, and for a time was the pinnacle of human and Pokemon achievement within the world. Unfortunately, this great civilization fell, and while the Poke-Romans monuments still stand today, the old Poke-Roman ways have slowly faded into obscurity, and that's why Team Imperium was formed. All of us in this organization are descendants from the ancient Poke-Romans, and we vowed to collect and preserve our heritage so it doesn't get lost to the sands of time. We honor our ancestors by holding ancient gladiator-style Pokemon battles in their ancient Coliseum, and the building we're in right now holds many relics and artifacts relating to their foregone society. As you keep browsing the museum, you eventually come to a large portrait of what looks like a high-ranking member of Team Imperium. Julius's eyes go wide and he yells out, "Hey, Mario! Why is the painting of this traitor still up on our walls? Take it down quickly and go burn it!" Julius is pinching the bridge of his nose in annoyance, and at this point, Sophia finally arrives and steps in to tell you who exactly the person in the portrait is.
You'll have to excuse Julius. The subject of Nero, the man in the painting, is a rather sore topic for him. You see, a few years ago, Nero was one of our brightest members, but took the idea of Team Imperium preserving their ancient heritage to an unexpected and dangerous level. He felt like any region that the ancient Poke-Romans had conquered long ago was rightfully Team Imperium's, and he and a group of zealots went against the Council's wishes to try and take them over. I'm ashamed to admit this, but for a period of time, I was part of them too.
Sophia glances down, ashamed of herself, while Julius jumps in again and is a little bit fired up. Thankfully, they failed their assault of the England region due to a powerful trainer stopping them, but the shame and disappointment I feel with Nero is unmatched. He shattered my trust in him, and thus he has been punished appropriately. In Julius's partial rage, he glances over at Sophia and notices her looking somewhat glum. He calms himself down and says, "I'm sorry I got carried away with our team's history, but now that you know why it's so important to me, you know why I must test you to see if you're worthy of earning an Imperium badge. Show me your Pokemon's power and do not waver." Julius throws out his Pokemon and you have a surprise gym battle against him. In the end, you earn his gym badge and really the respect of Team Imperium as a whole. Sophia presents you with a crystal, and in what's kind of a cool detail, the gem fits into the coin you have, which becomes the Imperium badge. Now that you have 4 gym badges under your belt, you press forward on your excursion through the region, and after waiting in some swampland, you make it to a town that has a heavy Tuscan countryside vibe. As you're about to enter the village's gym, you see a swarm of Team Esteta grunts jog past you, heading north towards the Florence city. Deep down, you know that you're the one who's gonna have to deal with them, but not wanting to confront them alone, you try to enter the gym and warn the gym leader. Unfortunately, the gym leader is out of town at the moment, so with no help from anyone else, you and your Pokemon run to the Florence town as fast as you can to try and stop whatever terrible plan Team Esteta is enacting. You might have been too late, however. When you show up at the city, you're shocked to find that the entire town has been destroyed, but not in a classic destruction type way. Many of the buildings and structures have been sculpted into various shapes and statues, and while the town is a complete disaster, there is some kind of artistic merit to it. You start to make your way through the distorted streets of the Florence city, and as you do so, you get bombarded by many Team Esteta grunts you have to battle. After demolishing a lot of them in Pokemon battles, you eventually reach a large clearing where most of the town has gathered. A person, most likely part of Team Esteta, is standing confidently atop a gigantic statue that looks exactly like them. They are laughing haughtily and talking down to the crowd of people, who are all upset that they can't get into their homes and that their town has been destroyed.
Is my presence just too dazzling for you? Can you not even bear to be within my grace? Is it making you angry, upset, furious even?
The Esteta admin notices you and gives a sweeping gesture.
Oh, it seems we have company. Come, pull up a chair and bask in the beauty before you.
You use your best Stone Cold expression, which is not very effective, and the man laughs once more.
I take it you won't go easy on fabulous old me, will you?
The man slips down from his perch and disappears running into the twisted maze of the city, and the frenzied crowd that listened to his nonsense starts to chase him. It's a very chaotic scene, and amidst the insanity, a familiar face emerges. Professor Cypress. He motions for you to follow him, and you go through another twisted labyrinth of alleyways that leads you to the professor's lab. Once inside, you find that it looks almost identical to the lab he has on the starting island, and Cypress himself sits down exhausted in a chair. The two of you have an interesting conversation about Team Esteta, in which the professor muses that were he younger, he might have actually believed in their cause and joined them, before the professor snaps back to reality and says that they're vandalizing the region at no thought to the people and Pokemon who live in it and have to be stopped. You promise Cypress you'll find the dazzling criminal and leave the Florence city going west. You pass by the Leaning Tower of Pisa ruins and then surf north along the coast. You eventually make it to the Milan town, where it seems that quite a bit of ruckus is being made at the town's large fashion runway. You're not sure if you have time to stop and look at what's currently in right now, and as you glance over that way, you see a brief glimpse of the Team Esteta admin you're looking for. He's on the runway showing off his moves and style, but no one in the crowd seems to care.
Why aren't you admiring me?
You push your way through the crowd of fashionistas and join the admin on stage. He's in the middle of having something of a mental breakdown, and with nobody else to target his rage at, his anger is thrust upon you.
So, you think I'm not fabulous, do you? Well, we'll just see about that! Come and aid me, my beautiful Pokémon! Nobody denies the exquisite charm of Venezio! For beauty, for art, for Team Esteta!
After tracking Venezio down, it looks like it's finally time for you and him to have a Pokemon battle. He has a Clefable, Sylveon, non-variant Aromatisse, and a Kirlia. And once beaten, he and his Pokemon are absolutely deflated.
No! It can't be! I'm the most exquisite and graceful member of Team Esteta! How could I be beaten by such a lowly passe trainer? I will never forget this player, and when we meet again, my Pokemon and I will defeat you with our luminescence!
The screen fades to black, and when it fades back in, Venezio is gone. At this point, you can go and battle the town's gym leader, earning your 5th badge, and after this, you can hang around Milan a little longer and do some clothes and Pokemon accessory shopping. Once you've realized that you've spent all your money buying various hats for your Pokemon, you think it's probably time to get back to your main journey, and you travel west. This takes you to the small town of Turin, and while there isn't a gym leader here, you've heard that their ancient Egyptian museum is somewhere worth visiting. You decide to take a quick look at the museum, and when you stop by, the door is wide open and sand is drifting out of the building. It doesn't look like this is normally supposed to happen, and when you go inside, it's like you've stepped into an entire other world. You're standing in an almost impossibly large room that literally feels like an ancient Egyptian desert. A deep layer of sand is covering the floor, and amidst the various Egyptian-like artifacts that are organized on tables, there are patches of grass with wild Pokemon lounging about. It seems that this is a very interactive museum, and you start wandering through the room. As you get closer to a large pyramid-like structure, you start to hear some yelling.
Get away from me, you stupid coffin! I'm not...
You run up over a small sand dune and see Marco struggling against a horde of Cofagrigus. They've got their creepy spectral hands wrapped around him and his Pokemon, and they're trying to pull them into the dark void of their coffins. If you didn't think the Pokemon world was messed up before, this situation might change your mind. Marco notices you and gives you a dirty glare.
What are you doing here? I don't need any help from a loser like you.
It sounds like he's asking for help, so you jump to Marco's aid. You battle 5 normal Cofagrigus in a horde battle, and once defeated, they disappear back into the sands of the exhibit. Marco is gasping for air after almost being suffocated, and he walks over and shoves you.
I told you I didn't need any help! Why do you keep butting in and ruining everything? If you think I'm gonna thank you for being stupid and making me look weak, then you're dumber than a slowpoke. Nothing about you deserves any praise, and now that I'm even stronger, you're going to pay.
Marco full-on lunges at you, and thankfully, because this is Pokemon, the two of you have a Pokemon battle instead of a fistfight. On Marco's team, he has the second form of his chosen starter, a Goomy, a Houndoom, the second form of the Italy region's bird Pokemon, and the regional variant of Mudtruff. Marco once more tastes the cruel feeling of defeat. He legitimately doesn't know what to say, and that's when the ground starts to rumble beneath you. You and Marco aren't sure what's happening, and that's when a giant Italian Cofagrigus starts rising up from the sand. It looks angry, and its piercing eyes lock dead focused on Marco. Unafraid, or maybe just too naive to realize the danger he's in, Marco sneers back at the monster. The creature lets out a chilling shriek, and its gigantic hands rush towards Marco. He fends off most of them with his Pokemon's attacks, but one of them grabs Marco and drags him deep into the depths of its body. You know Marco said he didn't want help, but with him being trapped inside a monster now, this is quickly becoming a scenario of life or death. You automatically jump to Marco's aid and get ready to fight the giant Pokemon. Now in this battle, the large Italian Cofagrigus is basically akin to a totem Pokemon from Alola. Its stats are raised and it has the ability to call various Pokemon within the museum to its aid. It's meant to be a pretty tough battle, and it's made even harder because it comes literally right after your battle against your rival. Once you've defeated the monster, the lid of its sarcophagus opens up and Marco and his Pokemon fall out of it. The Cofagrigus slowly starts sinking back into the sand, and a shaken Marco angrily throws a small red gem at the oversized Pokemon.
If you want it so bad, then take it! The stupid thing doesn't work anyways.
Marco returns his Pokemon back to its Pokeball and starts trudging through the sand back to the front door. If you're expecting any kind of thank you for saving his life, it never happens. Marco does acknowledge you with a scowl and a
What the schemo?
But aside from that, he leaves the museum without saying much. Figuring there's not much else to do here, you also go to leave the exhibit when suddenly a hand erupts from the ground and a person who looks like they work at the museum crawls out of the sand. They say that they're the curator of this museum and that normally the exhibit is a peaceful place that anyone can enjoy. But a rather rude child barged in and stole a sacred stone, causing everything to fall apart. The curator says that the ancient gem belonged to a pharaoh from a faraway region, and the legend around it was that whoever possessed it would have absolute control and never lose a battle. When the thief stole the stone, the Cafagrigus in the exhibit went crazy and started attacking people, and he was captured by them right before you arrived. The curator thanks you once again for literally saving their life and gives you an amulet coin as a small token of their appreciation. Okay, at this point in the story, you can go upwards and explore the partially dug cave to Kalos being worked on, but if you really want to move through the story, you'll have to go back to Milan and travel east, which will take you on the Stelvio Pass-inspired cycling road. Once you've made it through this mountainous cycling road, you'll arrive at the snowy Bolzano-based town. You earn another gym badge here, which is number 6, and you ride your bike down the other side of the mountain, which leads you to the seaside paradise of Venice. When you cruise into town, you find that a giant festival appears to be happening where everyone is wearing masks, and the overall vibe is very lively. As you wander the streets, even getting to buy a mask of your own, you spot a familiar although unnerving sight. A Team Esteta grunt is blending into the crowd and nobody, aside from yourself, seems to notice them. All the lights in the city suddenly turn off. 2 large lanterns are then lit on a stage above the masses, and you see 2 people you know very well. Team Esteta Admin Tempera and Team Esteta Admin Venezio.
Ladies and gentlemen, do not be alarmed, but we are from Team Esteta. We have been watching you from afar and come to plea with you to change your ways. This is a region that was built on creativity and humanity. And to see all of you throw that sense of culture away is breaking my heart.
Aw, there, Venezio. I'm sure these ignorant people are willing to change. For beauty and for art, we implore you, people of the region, join Team Esteta and build yourself anew.
The crowd seems somewhat ambivalent to the admin's words. They're not sure if this is part of the celebration or a couple crazy people who have been having too much of the festival's special lemonade, if you know what I mean, so they're mostly confused at what's happening. Venezio and Tempera get frustrated at this and try to explain in more detail who they are and what they're trying to do. This is perfect cover for you to sneak up on stage, and at this part in the game you have to navigate a maze of people and battle a lot of Team Esteta grunts who are blending in. When you eventually make it up on stage, both Venezio and Tempera gulp in fear. They know exactly how strong you are and also know that you have no problem in going all out and destroying them in battle. That's when Venezio gets an idea.
You may have hurt us separately, trainer, but if we combine our efforts, then surely you won't be able to surpass us! Aid me, Tempera! Call out your Pokémon and let us show this inelegant fool what Team Esteta stands for!
Tempera cackles in agreement and they join forces to take you on in a double battle. On their teams, Venezio uses the same one he had last time to battle you with the addition of a Gardevoir instead of a Kirlia, while Tempera uses a Nidoqueen, Muk, Liepard, and Crobat. You defeat the 2 of them easily, and after the battle, they're not really angry that they lost, but are more in awe of your incredible Pokemon handling ability. Venezio looks thoughtful for a second, then leans over to Tempera and whispers something to her. She nods in understanding, then turns to talk to you.
I know we're heated enemies, and you made me cry, but Venezio thinks that if you go see our boss, he might start to feel better. He thinks that nobody appreciates beauty or art anymore. But your battles are truly a sight to behold, so maybe you could help inspire him.
Venezio still looks thoughtful but joins in.
Before starting Team Esteta, we desperately tried to help Federico see that the region wasn't wholly lost, but he just didn't see it. If anyone could change his mind, we think it is you, young, dazzling trainer. We won't force you to do anything, as we are now criminals, I suppose. But if you have a heart, go to our castle in the countryside. That is where you'll find our boss.
The screen fades to black and you hear the sound of a motorboat speeding away. When it fades back in, Venezio, Tempera, and the Team Esteta grunts have vanished. So at this point in the game, what ends up happening is you go and challenge the gym leader in the Venice city, earning your 7th badge, and then you decide to go confront Federico at Team Esteta's hideout, which is only accessible through a small secret route connected to the Tuscan countryside village. You go there and a gigantic castle amidst a forest is waiting for you. This is Team Esteta's hideout, which is inspired by real-life Italy's castle town of Urbino, and it provides a final dungeon of sorts you have to try and maneuver through. You battle many grunts that are hanging out with their Pokemon in the hallways and rooms of the castle, and you eventually find your way to the chamber that Federico is in. It's a large room filled with stained glass windows, and Federico is examining a moderately sized statue in the center of the area. He hears you approaching and turns around.
So, you've arrived at last, the heralded savior of the region, come to destroy the terrible Team Esteta. I know we're seen as villains for what we are doing, but this is the only way to make the people of the region wake up and see what they've lost. Art, culture, beauty. These are the things people have forgotten about, and if I don't do something, they'll be lost forever.
Federico puts a hand on the statue and it starts to give off a low humming sound and vibrates slightly.
I do see a spark of something within you, though, trainer. A deep respect for our history. Perhaps some kind of hidden love for the arts. Let us battle and see if your spark develops into a true appreciation for art and battling, or if it withers away like so many others have. For beauty, for art, for Team Esteta.
The statue Federico is touching starts to move, and you realize that it's not really a statue, but a Pokemon. A mythical Pokemon at that. It comes alive fully now, and you call out your Pokemon and proceed to have a final showdown against Team Esteta leader Federico. On Federico's team, he uses the statue-like mythical Pokemon, a Rhyperior, a Golem, the final form of the Da Vinci Invention Pokemon, a Pidgeot, and an Ursaring. In the end, your Pokemon overcome Federico's, and he's left to quietly ponder his defeat. He says that he went to the ends of the earth to track down this mythical statue-like being because it was the Pokemon said to have inspired the region's big artistic revolution hundreds of years ago. He was going to use its ground manipulation power to try and inspire people once more, but after seeing you battle, Federico is perplexed. He sees now that you're truly a strong trainer that respects the ancient traditions of the region, but he laments that not everyone in the region is like you. Many just don't seem to care for the region's culture, and he's not sure what to do about that. As if on cue, a knocking sound is heard at the door and it creaks open to reveal Venezio and Tempera, but with them is also a very large crowd of people. There's all sorts of people in the group that you don't recognize, but there are a few that you do, including Sophia, the Milan gym leader, and even Professor Cypress.
Venezio, Tempera, what is the meaning of this?
Well, boss, we figured that even if this dazzling star was able to beat you and you recognized their passion, that you would still feel like the region is hopeless. So we did a little bit of traveling around the region, and
found all sorts of people that believe in your ideas. We wanted to show you that there are still people out there that care about the region's art and legacy.
All the characters that have gathered in the chamber go around and share their thoughts and feelings on how Team Esteta, in a way, ended up inspiring them and making them grow closer to art. They show Federico various objects and things they made after their encounters, such as Cypress, who shows a painting he created with his Pokemon of the twisted Florence town, and the Milan gym leader who created a new fashion line inspired by Team Esteta, and the whole point of this is to show Federico that he's somewhat accomplished his goal and many people in the region have remembered the arts.
Is it possible? Thank you for this, Venezio and Tempera. I am truly without words. There is hope for the region's future, after all.
Overjoyed, Federico proceeds to talk to everyone in the room for a while, which gets pretty cheesy, even for me, and the screen slowly fades to white. When it fades back in, it's sunset and it's just you and Federico standing on one of the castle's balconies looking out across the sea of trees. He apologizes for all the trouble he's caused in the region and truly regrets taking such drastic measures. He can see now that the spirit of creation will truly never die, and he is indebted to you for being one of the people to help show him that. He says that Team Esteta will be disbanded, but the spirit of them will never truly leave. He gives you a resolute goodbye and a smile, which is a little bit weird to see, and he leaves the castle as the screen fades to black. You've now completed the Team Masteta plotline, and at this point you can go on to finish the rest of the Pokemon League side of the game. You earn your final gym badge at the Tuscan Countryside Village, and you then take a ferry down to Vitoria Island to challenge the Pokemon League. You go through the island's Victory Road, which is moderately challenging, and right when sweet safety is within reach and you can see the temple of the Pokemon League, a familiar voice calls out behind you.
Not so fast, player! If you think you're gonna be the first of us to enter the league, then you've got another thing coming. It's my right to go in there and show off how strong I've become, and there's no way you're going to go ahead of me. Not this time. So stop giving me that stupid look and call out your Pokemon so you can lose.
That's right, Marco has made it to Victory Island and is challenging you to a Pokemon battle right before you enter the Pokemon League. It's a little bit of a douche move, but then again, that fits Marco to a T. On Marco's endgame team, he has the final form of whatever starter he took, a Goodra, a Houndoom, the final evolution of the Italy region's bird Pokemon, the Mudtruff regional variant, and a Galvantula. The battle is tough between the two of you, but in the end, you stand victorious. Marco is kneeling next to his defeated starter Pokemon, and you can barely make out tears starting to well up in his eyes. He quickly gets up and starts sprinting back down Victory Road, with his starter following close behind, and you can just barely make out some slight crying sounds coming from that direction. I hope you feel good right now because you've made it to the Italy region's Elite Four, and you're gonna need every ounce of strength you have left to make it through them. I'll be going over the Pokemon League members and gym leaders specifically in a little bit, but before we get there I wanted to call special attention to one of the Elite Four trainers, which is actually Marco's father, Antonio. That's right, in a shocking twist, Antonio not only runs a perfectly legal and in no way criminal organization, but is also one of the region's Elite Four members. When you battle him, he shows disappointment that his son hasn't made it to the league yet, but he can see it in your eyes that Marco tried hard, but couldn't stand up to your unmatched strength. After battling Antonio, you go on to defeat the rest of the Pokemon League members, and once they're all beaten, you stand atop the league and are crowned the Italy region's Pokemon champion. Now this is the main story I thought of for an Italian Pokemon region. I know it's a lot, and I may or may not have passed out a couple times while writing the script, but if you can believe it, there's just a little bit more I'd like to share. Just now, I went over all the events during the normal story, but now I'd like to actually go over all the post-game content I thought of for this region as well. So after becoming the Italy region champion, there's a couple new side quests and activities you can do. The first thing is that more challenges open up in the Rome town's Colosseum. These include new boss trainers including Federico, Venezio, and Tempera, who all have new teams, as well as new totem Pokemon to battle too. Another thing you can do is go on a search for the mythical Pokemon Federico had. After disbanding Team Masteta and going on a personal journey, Federico released the mythical Pokemon he awakened, and you can find and capture it while it's roaming around the region. The final thing you can do in the post-game is take part in a special post-game quest I'm calling the Razzo episode, otherwise known as the Rocket episode. I'll try to go through this one a little faster than the main story, but I'll be honest, this is probably still gonna be pretty long. So after you've become champion, you'll awake at your summer home on the Cagliari Island. Not knowing where adventure will take you today, you go downstairs and you suddenly get a message on your headgear. It turns out it's from Julius, Team Imperium's leader, and he's requesting your urgent presence at the Vatican-inspired building. You fly straight to his gym, and when you arrive, you find Julius pacing back and forth anxiously. He says that he has a huge top-secret problem to share with you, and because you're now the region's champion, he thinks you'll be strong enough to help him out with it. Apparently, one of Julius's sources has informed him that a group of sinister criminals is going to be going after one of the region's legendary Pokemon. No, not the statue one that Federico had, but the one that is said to have created cities in the region long ago, which is either the eagle Pokemon in one version of the game or the wolf Pokemon in the other. Julius isn't sure how this group of villains found out where the legendary was hiding, as only he and a couple other Team Imperium leaders knew of its whereabouts, but he wants you to go to where it's supposed to be and stop the criminals from doing anything bad to it. Julius reveals that the legendary is atop the Mount Etna-based volcano on Vitoria Island, and you rush over there and go inside the mountain's cave. Everything seems pretty normal, but there is a new hole in the cavern's wall that looks very much man-made, and when you go inside, you're surprised to find a group of people are in there, and they don't look especially nice. You try to move through the cave to look for the legendary, but it seems that these people are so bad that they're not gonna let you. You have a lot of Pokemon battles with them as you try to see if the legendary is still here, and that's when you learn that all of these bad guys are part part of Team Rocket. They don't look like the Team Rocket you've heard so much about, however, and one of the grunts says that they're a special branch of Team Rocket that inhabits and controls the Italian region from the shadows. Kind of a scary thought that a version of Team Rocket is so embedded in the region, but thankfully they're not super tough to deal with. They use a blend of Pokemon that other versions of Team Rocket have used, and their teams consist of higher level Pokemon like Golbat, Muck, Raticate, and even Honchkrow. After fighting through many grunts, you make it to the exit, which puts you right on top of the mountain. It has a stunning view of the island, and you see what looks like an altar carved out of stone. No legendaries here, but there appears to be either steel feathers or small chunks of rock on the altar, which means that some kind of Pokemon was definitely living here before Team Rocket undoubtedly kidnapped it. You hear footsteps behind you and whirl around to see Antonio strutting up the mountain. He's wearing an expression of surprise that quickly morphs into a sly smile upon seeing you.
I see that Team Rocket has successfully completed the first step in their mission and taken the legendary Pokemon that resides here. I'll admit, I didn't think he would be able to do it, but this is a pleasant surprise to see.
You're getting a pretty villainous vibe from Antonio, and you get into a battle stance.
Do you really think you can battle me? I've been leading this region's branch of Team Rocket for years, manipulating and controlling everything behind the scenes. Stronger trainers than you have tried to stop me, and each one has failed. Even if you were to beat me in a battle now, what would happen? You call the police on me? I own the police, so I'd be set free in hours. The only way you win, child, is if I want you to win.
A grunt runs out of the cave panting and says, "Don Antonio, the boat is ready for departure. Should we stop phase 2? Antonio gives a nod and the grunt rushes back down into the cave. Antonio starts walking away, and as he does, he chuckles.
If you really want to stop us, then I'm sure Julius can tell you where we're going. In fact, I made sure he knew we were going to steal the legendary, just so he'd send you here and I could speak to you.
Antonio walks away with literally enough swagger to take over a region, and you stand at the top of Mount Etna processing everything that just happened. A ringtone suddenly blares out and you realize it's your headgear. You answer the phone call and you find Julius is asking you how everything went. You tell him what happened, which, let's be honest, is not the greatest news to hear, and Julius is rightfully panicking. He says that if Team Rocket is boarding a boat, then they're probably heading for an old warehouse of theirs at the Pontine Islands-inspired area. It's a private group of islands owned by Team Imperium that only members of their group are allowed to go to, but years ago Julius let Team Rocket set up a warehouse on the island in exchange for them not doing anything to Team Imperium. Julius says that he'll prepare a special boat for you that will take you to the islands, and he begs you to stop Team Rocket and set the region's ancient legendary free. You go to the dock at the southern part of the region and board Team Imperium's boat. It takes you on a very long voyage, which eventually brings you to a cluster of islands located roughly here. These are the Pontine Islands and have been used by Team Imperium for centuries. You land at a small abandoned village, and as you're taking a look around at everything, a shadow rustles. You turn around, calling your Pokemon at the ready, and an old man hobbles out of a decaying shack.
I am Nero. Who are you and why are you here?
You can barely make out the symbol for Team Imperium on his tunic, meaning he definitely isn't a member of Team Rocket, so you explain the current situation to him.
So, the region's legendary is in jeopardy. I do feel sad about that, but I shan't be helping you. In case it isn't obvious, I'm going through an eternity-long banishment here, so I can't really do much. I can tell you the warehouse you seek is on the northernmost island, but that's all I can really do.
Nero lets out another wheezing cough, and you thank the old hermit for his help. He looks down solemnly, staring at nothing, and you quietly walk past the old broken man. Heeding Hobo Nero's words, you make your way from island to island, finding rare items and Pokemon, eventually arriving at the northernmost one, which indeed has a large warehouse on it. You battle many Team Rocket grunts on the road leading to it, and when inside, you're met with a maze-like puzzle involving the classic Team Rocket warp panels. You eventually find your way through the maze and enter a large room. You see the ancient legendary Pokemon tied up in restraints, and a fedora-wearing person is yelling at it.
Hey! Are you listening to me? I'm your trainer now, so you have to obey me! Huh? Whoever's making that annoying stomping sound needs to stop or else.
Marco turns to face you with his trademark sneer, and for a brief moment you see absolute panic in his eyes, before he recovers his composure and launches a barrage of insults at you.
Guess what, player? I'm a part of Team Rocket now and have a very special mission. You probably don't know what it's like to be important, but the Dawn of Team Rocket entrusted me to capture this region's legendary. Once I get this thing to stop being so stupid and obey me, I'll use its power to be Team Rocket's strongest member.
You're unwavering in your goal to release the legendary, and Marco huffs at you.
I've battled you enough to know what a whiny kid you are. So if you want to stop me, then let's do this. Get ready for a smackdown, perdente!
This is the lead into your final rival battle against Marco, and the Pokemon he uses are all the same ones he had last time to battle you, with the exception that all of them are now much higher levels and his Houndoom is able to Mega Evolve. He tries hard, as he always does, but it just isn't enough to knock you down. Marco yells in frustration at both you and at the legendary Pokemon who didn't aid him. He's getting really worked up, and you hear some radio static and an unintelligible voice come from a radio piece he's wearing.
No, I can't! I can't do this! I already have the legendary here and everything. I'm not just gonna leave it here so they can take it from me.
While you can't hear what the voice is saying, it's clear that what it says next to Marco carries a lot of weight, because even though he's frustrated, he grits his teeth and says,
Fine, Dad.
And walks away from the legendary. As he walks to the door, he gives you one final shoulder check and and leaves the warehouse. The rest of Team Rocket follows him, and soon Team Rocket is entirely vacated from the warehouse and the Pontine Islands as a whole. At this point, you free the legendary, and it was so inspired by your conviction and battling ability you showed earlier that it allows you to challenge it and ultimately catch it if you so choose. This is the final event you get to do in the Ratso episode, and once you capture it, you've successfully foiled Team Rocket's plans. At least for today. Now, one final thing you can do in the post-game is once you've completed the Ratso episode, you can keep exploring the Pontine Islands area, and you'll eventually find your way to a steep cliff on the edge of the ocean. Sitting on a rock, looking out at sea, is Old Man Nero. No words are exchanged between the two of you, but he calls out his Pokemon to battle you. Whether he's battling you out of respect for saving the region's legendary, or if some of his arrogance is still with him after all these years and he wants to prove his worth, it's impossible to say. What I can say, however, is that this is the game's final boss, much like Red in Generation 2, and all of Nero's Pokemon would be at extremely high levels. On his team, he would use a Nidoking, Nidoqueen, Drapion, Electros, Electivire, and Magnezone. Once you win the battle, no words are said, and you take a seat next to Nero and watch the sun set on a beautiful Italian region day. Okay, before we close out the story section, and really the video in general, I wanted to briefly go over what the Elite Four and gym leaders in this region are like. As you just saw, I didn't include a ton of them in the actual story, but I did plan out each of their type specialties, their design inspiration, and what their signature Pokemon would be, so I wanted to share all of these ideas with you now. So talking gym leaders, the first one is a fairy-type user who is based on a woman in Italian folklore called the Befana, who is a gift-giving witch and would use a Togetic. The next gym leader is a ground-type user who is heavily inspired by the Renaissance sculptor Michelangelo and would have a ball toy. After this is a fire-type trainer who resides in the Naples-based town's opera and is one of the leading performers. Opera actually originated in Italy, so I decided to reference that within this region by making the fire-type gym leader an opera singer who uses a Heatmore as their signature Pokemon. After this is the electric-type gym leader you might remember as Julius, the head of Team Imperium, who's meant to embody the idea of ancient Romans, and his best Pokemon would be an Electabuzz. The next gym leader is a psychic-type master who is also a fashion model at the Milan-based city and would have a Gothitelle. Gym leader number 6 is a mountain climber within the Alps area that specializes in ice-type Pokemon and uses the regional variant of Gogoat. Up next is a water-type gym leader in the Venice town who is based around a gondolier and uses the new Basking Shark Pokemon. And the final gym leader is a grass-type user in the Tuscan countryside town who uses various berries to make drinks and wine for the region's residents and has a victory bell. Switching over to the Elite Four now, 4/5 of them are inspired by ancient Roman gods. The first Elite Four member is the water-type master Ogun, who uses the final form of the region's Hippocampus Pokemon. He's based on the Titan god Oceanus, and out of all the Elite Four members is probably the nicest to people. The second Elite Four member is a Steel-type user based on the Titaness Themis, who is the goddess of divine law and order. She's probably the coldest out of the Elite Four and uses an Aggron. The next Elite Four member is someone who isn't actually part of the Roman god theming and instead brings more of an Italian mob boss flavor. I'm pretty sure you remember him from the story, but I'm talking of course about Antonio. He specializes in dark types, and while his main Pokemon is a Houndoom, I feel obligated to say that he would use a Honchkrow too. The fourth Elite Four member returns to the Roman god idea and is a Psychic type master based on Mnemosyne, the Titaness of memory and remembering. She uses a Reuniclus as her signature Pokemon. The final member of the Pokemon League and the reigning champion of the region before you kick them out is based on Saturn, the Titan of Harvest and someone who is often regarded as the leader of the Titans. He doesn't have a specific type he uses, instead focusing on Pokemon that are insanely strong, and his ace would be a Como-O. And that's all the story and narrative stuff I thought of for an Italian Pokemon region. I know it's a lot, and believe me, writing and recording 30 pages of a story makes it feel 10 times longer, but I love what I was able to come up with for the region, and hopefully you guys like it too. And that pretty much wraps up all the ideas I have for what I think Italy could be like as a Pokemon region. This is my longest regional video to date, and I'm not gonna lie, I think I might be dead right now. Italy absolutely overwhelmed me with the amount of art, culture, and history within it, and I tried as hard as I could to implement everything cool about Italy into this Pokemon region. It was exhausting to research so many things about it, but I think the region turned out incredibly well and shows one possibility of what an Italian Pokemon region could be like. Anyways, what do you guys think? Do you like my ideas for an Italy region? Would you want to adventure through it? Is Marco maybe too mean of a rival because I feel like I might have gone too far? Let me know what you guys think of this Italian region and feel free to share any of your own thoughts and ideas for it below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.
Why did you stop me? I had things under control. I totally could have taken out that stupid weakling. The legendary Pokemon was also going to listen to me too. Why did you bring me back here? Answer me, father.
Marco, please calm yourself. I didn't call you back here out of disappointment. I'm actually quite proud with how strong you've grown and what you've accomplished.
You are? Then what did you want to talk to me about?
Though you may not have succeeded in taming the legendary, your potential is now clear. As such, I think it's time for you to meet an old friend. Think of him as your new mentor.
Mentor? But I don't need a mentor! I've gotten this far on my own and...
But you can become much stronger, my son. Only the weak believe in becoming strong without help. Trust me, your mentor will be a powerful ally and will teach you to become a great member of Team Rocket.
So you're Marco, huh? Let's talk.